Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv, Wolok, my partner in crime, Vasili, Gianarakos, for another episode. Welcome back, my friend. How are you doing?
Doing good, Yariv. I'm excited for this one. We got a great guest, and we're going to dive into some, 2023 NHL draft talk. So where the Flyers are at in the standings right now, it's important, we get that information from the one and only Steve Kournianos, right?
Yeah. And welcome to the show, Steve Kournianos. Welcome back, the draft analyst.
How you doing, up, buddy? Guys? How are you doing? Thank you for having me on. This is always something I look forward to. Always. Every single one we've done. And actually, what's funny, too, is I go back and I watch him again. Not because I'm like an egomaniac who loves looking at myself, but I like the information. Like what we talk about is freaking relevant. In some cases, it's prophetic. This is easily my favorite podcast that I've done. Out of all the ones I've done, this is my favorite one. Dude, I'm not trying to diss the other ones because I have a lot of fun with them too, but you guys easily.
That is such an honor to hear, man. Really appreciate it.
Seriously.
We get so jacked up.
Two of that. We could do this 6 hours if we could.
Yeah. Like I said, for me, it's awesome because I just started off listening to you. Like I was just looking for draft content, and I fell in love with listening to you just rant. I'm like, I love the way this guy could just talk
and rant. Yes, there is ranting. There's ranting and there's cursing and there's
that's the fun stuff, though.
But like you said, like a lot of your stuff is it's packed with information. Like if somebody sits down and listens to your content, like you'll have history, recent content. You'll talk about play. You'll talk about comparisons. You talk about the business end, the financial end, the training part. You will add all of that perspective in just talking about one single topic, and that's one of my favorites. So for me, it's an honor to have you on here.
Oh, thank you. Likewise. Listen, it's the information. We've been in the information age, so it's like, fans have so many options, right? They could go. There's like how many Flyers podcasts are there, and vlogs, and Twitter accounts, and message boards, and fan pages, and so I feel like if I'm going to do it, then this is why I come on here, is because I know that we all put the time in, we all do the research, we all make this a priority. This isn't like I know it might feel like a hobby sometimes because we have so much fun doing it. But this is exactly what I'd rather be doing than anything else. I'm honest when I say that. Like talking hockey with people that love it as much as I love it is the reason why I do it. You know what I mean? It's just so much fun.
It's the best. And we appreciate you coming on. I feel very similar way. Vasili, I don't want to speak for you, but
100% same thing, right?
Yeah.
Like we all love to talk hockey, and that's the reason we're here, right? To mainly talk hockey and just talk about the sport that we love. Obviously,
that's it.
It's a borderline obsession. Like I'll find myself like during the day just sitting there thinking about UFAs, as if it's like my job. I'm like, oh, who's available this offseason? Let me run the numbers, and it's like
let me crunch it down.
Cap friendly is the heroine of
hockey.
It's like
it's the best.
You could just get lost.
Yeah,
especially with the armchair like GM tool and stuff.
It's like one of like many websites too, like that you just you know what, I'm just gonna lay in bed and study hockey for like the next 5 hours, and especially if you're debating someone and you want to be right, like you're like, oh, they don't know this.
Yeah,
and then that's what happened with my rankings with the draft. Is like I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna spend a day on it. I'm just going to write little blurbs. And meanwhile, I'm like, no, I have to find out like X, Y, Z about, so it's fun. Like I said, it's fun.
Well, and let's, I guess give people a little preview of what we're going to be talking about. We'll talk about a little bit of the Flyers, current situation. Then we'll go into some Flyers prospect talks. For those who are not aware, that is what Steve does best. That's what the draft analyst is. Obviously, you should be able to tell by the name. Definitely check out his content, his podcast. I think you're still running a site. Are you still doing that?
Substack, though. It moved to Substack. Draftanalyst.substack.com. So if you go to the draftanalyst.com, that's for like historical purposes. 2015 draft to 2021 draft.
Yep.
But everything from 22, but everything from 23 onward is on Substack.
Okay, great. Good to know. So for those who are not aware, that's Steve's, specialty. And so we're going to talk about Flyers prospects, and then we'll just get into the draft, and we'll talk, we'll focus on the top 10 guys, early risers, but we'll get into the fun stuff. Flyers don't even have a second round pick at this point. So, if we want to talk third round, that might be less sexy, but maybe there's a couple, hidden gems. In those situations, I always think it's like, what's going to fall, but we'll see. So let's get right off the bat. So the Flyers actually just lost a tough game to the Tampa Bay Lightning 5-2, a game where, quite frankly, I think they were a little bit of expected to lose this one. Tampa put on maybe their worst performance of the past few seasons against the Carolina Hurricanes. I think that the only team did not have a shot on net, which is like crazy to think about that Tampa Bay would go through that. So, you show up to this game, the Flyers are already kind of reeling. They're missing a bunch of talent. And they're also, kind of lost probably some momentum here as things haven't been great of late. Just, the things around the team with the trade deadline and everything, it didn't have a bunch of gusto. They played decent, actually. They didn't play the worst hockey, but the game got away from them at one point. And they had to kind of battle to keep it relevant. Vasili, I'll go to you first, and then we'll let Steve dig in. But anything you want to add to the breakdown of the 5-2 loss?
Yeah, so I mean, they kind of kept pace with the Lightning in the first period, and then from there, it kind of unravels for them in the second, and it's really just a lack of discipline, right? They take a bunch of penalties, and when you take a bunch of penalties against a Tampa Bay team that has such a great power play as they do, they're obviously going to burn you. And I mean, the main factor is Nikita Kucherov, right? He gets 3 points on the power play. That's 2 goals, 1 assist, and he essentially really starts off kind of the turn in the other way of the game for them at the beginning of the second. And then from there, I do give the Flyers credit. Like, they don't let it turn into a blowout, and they do kind of make it competitive in the third. Basically keep it 4-2 for most of the game to that late 5-2 goal there. And then I guess the main storylines really is Joel Farabee getting benched in the second period along with Travis Sanheim. Then they do come back to play in the third there. And I thought Farabee actually had a pretty good game despite getting benched. I mean, he had an assist and he looked fiery out there. And aside from Farabee, I would say, Frost and Tippett were probably the standouts for the Flyers. That they were a line in general, and they were probably the best line in the game, and they've been the Flyers' best line, I think, the past handful of games. So I guess it's a good thing. Even in a loss, you see the younger guys kind of play pretty well. So that was my thoughts anyway.
Yeah, no, really well stated there. I think the theme overall I saw in that game is just a less disciplined game than the Flyers have been playing all year. Just penalties, the benchings and coinciding with Farabee, with a retaliatory move, then D'Angelo with the retaliatory move. It just, almost like he maybe lost him for a night. At least it felt that way a little bit. Steve, I'm not sure if you had a chance to check that game out, but maybe just your tone on the Flyers' current situation. And, they're in a little bit of a losing skid here.
Yeah, and it's not like they could blame selling off at the deadline.
Yeah.
It's basically like, pretty much, the lineup has been okay health wise, outside of the main guns that you lost in the beginning of the season. But
TK as well. Recently,
yeah. I saw the spear though, and so at first I'm like, oh, horrible. But then I saw who he did it to. I'm like, there's got to be a reason why. So, and again, I'm not justifying it. He deserves it. He's going to get it. He's going to get the book thrown at him. He should.
He got 2 games announced earlier today.
Yeah, 2-game suspension.
Oh, that's actually not that bad.
No, I thought it would be more, which is kind of surprising for what he did. But
only phone hearing.
Between the Austin Watson flying elbow that went unpenalized to the I guess that was bad. Dude, he speared the guy,
and he went looking for him too. Like, he wasn't really with him, and then he's just like, "Yep, let me dig in."
But no, to answer your question about the losing ways, I think we talked about it. Remember how you work hard and you want to outplay people, and even though you don't have a lot of talent, and that's reflective in the goal scoring, that you'll still outwork everybody. To do that, to sustain that over a full 82, especially when you fall out of a playoff spot and the teams ahead of you go out and they're busy at the deadline, they're buying, right? the Devils bought, the Sabres bought, the Senators bought. And so technically, like, even though they're not eliminated officially, I think if they were still in the mix, you could maybe stomach a loss like that to Tampa, considering, like you said, Tampa was playing terribly and they would do. And I guess maybe a little disappointing for Flyers fans because they're losing. The losing, like, seems to be like for most of the season when they lost, it was close. They gave a great effort, but they've been on the wrong end of some bad losses, and so maybe it's like flashbacks. To last year.
That's a good point. That's a good point because last year there was a lot of blowouts, and you're right, Steve. Like most of the season, it's been a lot of close losses, I would say. So I think,
like 10 overtime. What was it? Is it 1-10 in overtime?
Yeah, exactly.
Where if you could just, let's say, be 500 like a normal team would be,
you're in the playoff mix, pretty much.
You that's 4 extra points or 5 extra points, and you might consider like, okay, well, I want to go to the game. Because I'm a fan, I want to spend my money because it'll be competitive. And they've been, but listen, you also got so many kids playing too. So, like, those kids aren't used to playing, 82-game schedules. This is the first time, I think, for, like, a lot of guys, right? Frost, first time.
Tippett as well.
Tippett, yeah. Allison, is he still out?
Allison, Cates.
Case.
Cam York, technically as well.
Yeah, so there's a lot of factors involved, but I don't know if it's going to continue for the next 10 games. You know how I feel. If my team's out, I'm not going to play that. Well, I'm a fan. I want them to win. I want them to lose. I want them to get the higher draft position. Yep. But then again, we could talk about with the draft how this is a really deep draft. So, if you want to get the best shot at Bedard, fine. But you're gonna walk away.
Picking anywhere in the top 10, you're pretty well off,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, I think that Flyer fans need to hear that because if you listen to the messaging, and let's be honest here, majority of people who are Flyers bloggers, is not a knock. This is us included. They are not draft experts. They are not experts on prospects. They're not looking. So, like, when you hear that you're not part of the Bedard conversation, it's understandable that people are just pissed right off the bat. But they need to hear that there are potential star players throughout here. I know Bedard comes out of the box, generational, maybe another McDavid type of guy. But again, that's not the only piece you need, and not everybody gets that.
Look at 1991. Great example, right? Eric Lindros goes first overall because Quebec stunk, and there was no competition for that. The Flyers did not make the playoffs for the second year in a row, I think, after going to the conference finals. And everyone's mad, and they get the 6th round pick or the 6th overall pick, and it's freaking Peter Forsberg.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that's why it's I'm not saying, actually, I think that this draft is probably deeper than 91, a lot deeper than 91. But that's just one example of like, we
what
didn't
could
get the guy that
happen.
we
Exactly.
wanted. And so, of course, they got traded for one another. That's another story. But still.
What a great preview for the draft preview later. Yeah. No, that's great to hear. But so let's bring it back to something that Vasili was talking about. So Farabee is considered to be having a down year, and he is. Yes. Statistically, he is. It makes sense.
Slow start,
yeah. And again, he pretty much had this surgery, the serious surgery, and then just started his season. But he's doing about the same that the other young guys are. I mean, give or take a few points. He's been a little cold, but he's been playing better of late. But him and Sanheim were benched. Sanheim also, similar type of season, had maybe his best season as a Flyer last year, gets this big contract, and this year struggles. Now, that is, to me, relatively common. I'm not freaking out about it. I'm not sitting here going Sanheim is a blown asset. I don't know what value. Like, I don't see any of that. I just see him kind of being pushed and him not having the best season. But Steve, I want to go to you first on this. You said yes immediately. Like, when you look at somebody like Travis Sanheim, obviously you've seen him definitely from a distance for several years. I know you followed him in juniors and whatnot. What do you think about him signing this big contract, now kind of struggling a little bit, but obviously still playing consistently the number 3, number 2 defenseman on this defense?
He's definitely I haven't watched him every game like you guys.
Yeah.
But I noticed that when the Flyers, first of all, I was watching the Flyers in the beginning of the season because I wanted to see how immediate, if there would be an impact, if it was going to be immediate. And that was from the coaching change. And that then when the Flyers, every time I would look up, the Flyers were either in a close game or winning a close game, which is what they did not do the year before, the 2 years, really any of the 2 seasons prior. So Sanheim was like, "Oh, okay, all right." I said he's never going to be who we thought he was going to be, but and that was like the whole thing, like with the size and the hands. Like you felt like he had something. He could be a 40-point guy or a 45-point guy. How come we're never going to see it? And it's always been consistency. So the few times I've watched him, turnovers. You want him to be like a take charge number one guy, even though he's not nominally that. You want him to at least challenge someone to be that guy. And when they gave him the extension, I'm like, all right, but he really hasn't been consistent at all in his entire career. So, like, it's not like he was like a Lindholm or like an Ekholm, right? Those two guys, I think of consistency. It's like, it's just night in, night out, same thing. Doesn't have to score, but night in, night out, what you're getting defensively, you're getting breakouts, penalty kill, etc. And Sanheim, sometimes you're like, why? What are we going to get tonight? And
Yeah, and I think he's one of those guys where if I'm Chuck Fletcher, he's actually a guy I'm looking to trade secretly. Like, I'm not publicizing it, but he's a guy, he has a no trade clause kicking in. It doesn't mean if he's on this team, it is a problem next year, but I have a hole down the middle of my team, quite a big one. I don't know when Sean Couturier is coming back. And I look at that guy, and I get why they gave him the term and the money. I think they paid him a little bit too much. But at the same time, they locked up a guy who they know for sure that even if they needed to move him later, he's always kind of a movable piece. He's a guy who can definitely play in your middle pairing. So I think if you're looking to move somebody, that might be a sneaky pick. But I expect a guy like this to rebound. Like I think the Flyers expect it from him. And I actually think that Tortorella is probably being relatively hard on him right now. And I think he kind of needs that. I don't want to say he's soft because I don't really believe in that, but a guy. He's a guy who's always wavered depending on his confidence, and I think he needs to grow out of that. He's now 26 years old.
Yeah.
Now he has to get to the point where no matter what the coach says to him, he has to get a little bit more of that Provorov in him, where he doesn't really care what goes on around him. He shows up with the most consistent game every single day. He's the only defenseman on the Flyers who's able to do that, to be consistent from game to game. I think Sanheim needs to get a little bit more mentally tough. And, maybe this will pay. He's never really been benched, quite frankly, on the Flyers. Never will afford to do it. Vasili, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I just think it's really more the consistency thing with Sanheim, obviously. And it's kind of a season-to-season thing because you see last year he has his best season. The season before that, he didn't really have the greatest season. But then the season before that, where he played with Provorov, and it was kind of a mess of a year. They played a lot better, and he played a lot better in general, right? So it's kind of just been an up and down, almost like trajectory of his career. So I kind of do think that from Tortorella's perspective and the coaching staff, they're saying like, well, we've seen you do it in the past, so we're going to push you now to get it all the time because we know that you can be better. So we want to see the consistency come out of your game, right? And that's something that obviously has not been there. So I think from that situation, I mean, the team has to kind of look at it and say, well, if he can't be consistent, we're paying him this much money. We have to probably look at potentially moving him if, we're going to allocate this much money to a defenseman when we have holes in other places. So it's definitely an interesting situation for him and the contract going forward. So I'm kind of interested to see how it plays out. But from, his perspective, the rest of the season, I'm wondering if he could just cement himself as being a constant in the lineup because the last couple of weeks he's getting scratched, he's getting benched in one period. And I guess Tortorella in his press conference is saying, well, we're just trying to get a reaction out of some of these guys. So I think that's kind of directed to Sanheim, really.
Yeah. Like, I think people underestimate anger.
Yeah, for sure.
I think they think that like, oh, you're gonna make the player, like everybody keeps referring to how the modern player of today. I noticed this stuff like, oh, you got to talk to people differently than you did. Look, to some degree that is true, but that's because communication has evolved. Like the knowledge around it has evolved. Like you can get more, you learn certain things.
But no doubt about it, they're challenging him, and I think they should because they're paying him all this money to be like a pretty good defenseman for them, and he hasn't been that yet. So
and that's kind of what I want to say. That is not going away. Like that aspect of human beings is not going away, that they need to be pushed and challenged. And again, like, can you utilize his anger. Like he did get benched in a hometown game. He thought he was going to play. Like these, I remember everybody cried about Cam York, how upset he was and how he had such a bad attitude after. I was like, he's supposed to be pissed.
It worked for the better, yeah.
I was like, why is it a big deal that he's angry? Let him eat it. Let him think about it and let him use it against him.
These are competitive players, right? Like if you bench a guy and he isn't angry, isn't that saying more actually about him?
Right.
In a negative way, right? So
yeah. Steve, what do you think about that? Kind of what I'm saying there. You know, I know you've been watching the game for a long time. Like, have you ever seen like these benchings kind of?
Yeah, it's these players are proud. They don't like being benched. They've been the number one thing about to be a top guy in the NHL. It is just implied that they were the top guy every year of their lives playing in hockey. That, you know, we see guys that will be the top guy all the way up to the AHL level. And when they get to the NHL, that's it. Like they're now a checker, and that's what they're going to be known as. The poor guy's like, hey, I was a 60-goal scorer. Hey, but the guys that make it to the NHL and stick, like they have a responsibility. It's leadership. Like you have to lead by examples. You could give us as many speeches as you want, but if you're one of the high paid players in the team and you're in that locker room and there are young kids who are probably friends and they're not hanging out with the older guys, when they go out to eat afterwards, they're all like, I can't believe that freaking dude makes 8 times more than you, and you're 10 times the defenseman that he is. Sometimes these conversations are said. If it's a close-knit team and they all love each other, then you don't have to worry about that stuff. So, yes, absolutely. Like, the players have to be held accountable. I mean, freaking Cooper just benched. You talk about the Lightning. He benched Kucherov and Stamkos and Boyne.
Basically, all
3 of the top 10 plays in the game, maybe top 15 plays in the game.
Key factors of their cup wins.
Yeah,
and they exactly.
Well, you know what? You know what bothers me is that people only focus on the immediate in that. Yeah. They only go, oh, he lost the game. He lost that game, and the next game they didn't show up too. But like they're like, oh, did he make the right move? It's like most of the results of most of this stuff is going to take a lot longer than a week, a day, a game.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like this is like they're about to go for a playoff run. He's doing it now.
He's planting the seeds, basically.
And here's the thing with Tortorella. So obviously, as a Ranger fan, like he was my team's coach, and
we should have said
they had success with him. So like he benched everybody. He literally benched everybody. Okay, it's just who he is, and every player who's played for him outside of the 1 or 2 who are still like upset about it. They'll say, like Cam Atkinson was like the first guy to come out and say it was like, hey, listen, this is how, but like he gets results. And that was the intent in hiring him is to fix things or stop the bleeding. And, part of that process, if you're a Flyers fan and you're like, you can't be a hypocrite. You can't say for 5 years, play the kids, play the kids, play the kids. And they play the kids and they're like, oh, they're not that good. They're not that good. Like, you wanted to play the kids, and the kids are actually pretty good.
I know.
We're seeing that now. So with that, when you have kids out playing the veterans, you know what I mean? To a degree, sometimes like, over long stretches, that veteran has to have some pride and say, all right, I can't let this happen. This kid's on a freaking ELC. And even though I'm getting more minutes, and listen, Ted Lasso is a great show, and I hate to use like something Hollywood to compare to real life with what's going on with the Flyers, but that locker room dynamic, I think is pretty close. Like where just because we're from the same country doesn't mean we have to like each other. There's going to be infighting and problems, and so I think what Torts does, I'm being honest with you, I think it's kind of like it's a form of leadership that is proven to be effective, where you make everybody hate you, so they rally together.
Herb Brooks style.
Prove you wrong, exactly, and so like Torts is fair. Okay, he's not unfair. A lot of coaches, they're unfair. They will not bench a veteran, but they will bench the kid 50 times a week.
Yeah.
That what Torts does is he does this. He just waits. I bet he has like a freaking spreadsheet in his office somewhere. And he's like, all right, whose turn is it next week? All right. Oh, Hayes. He'll turn the puck over. All right. He's going to get a benching. Because again, it's to understand, because with a bench usually comes what? A meeting, a discussion. Not at the moment. He'll just bench and say, we'll talk later, but you're not playing. Okay. And the player's cursing him under his breath. And he's like, can't believe he's doing this to me. He's going to be all over freaking social media. Torts is like, I don't care. I got to focus on the game. They have the meeting afterwards. Torts basically, he's the kind of coach where he will give them a plan and say, this is what you need to do better. You're going to spend an extra hour with the video coach now. We're going to spend extra time after practice, so on and so forth. And it's the suck. And every player who's played for him at one point or another goes through it. So, next year is going to be more telling record-wise. But I don't know. As an outside observer who was really, I want to say, I was embarrassed because I'm not a fan. But
no, we talked about it on here.
Fan, yeah. I was like, it was really embarrassing what you saw from the Flyers under, Yo and Vino. And I'm not blaming those two guys necessarily, but like to get blown out.
I blame Vino. I blame Vino.
But you didn't. The Flyers are not an embarrassment this year. Like they came to play. They scored big wins. They beat good teams.
They're competitive in almost every, not almost every game, but like you're saying, mostly their games this season have been very close, which is telling compared to last season where it's the complete opposite.
It's a clear talent issue now. The issue is not effort. The issue is not goaltending. The issue is in tactics either. It's personnel. Well, like your top line is like Kevin Hayes.
They need some top line guys for sure. Yeah.
Well, not necessarily right away. Yeah, this is something that we have to discuss, is because it's a big market. It's a demanding fan base. It's a fan base that's used to winning, or has seen winning before. And I say winning in terms of like just being contenders every year. So this could be a dangerous area because, look at New Jersey, look at the Rangers. Look at Ottawa and Detroit, and they started their rebuilds before you guys. So you have to accept it. Well, maybe not the Devils, but no, the Devils did. So you have to say, what is this going to happen? What's our long-term plan going to be? And part of that is that if Torts is in this for the long haul, and I think he is, I think you might get more of this. You're going to get guys getting benched, and it's not a big freaking deal. It's if the guy was like so terrible the whole season, you're benched. You're a fourth liner now, and we're going to replace you. But one game at here, one game there, it's not the end of the world. It's part of the sport. Yeah, not everyone is going to be like freaking Joel Embiid or Jalen Hurts, like where everything they do, anything they do, it's the Midas touch, everything turns to gold. You can, especially,
and even that doesn't always last.
Yeah,
with a certain player, and the reason I say that I think it's AV's fault is to go back to what you're saying. AV had more talent, and it got worse results, and things got worse under him. Now, maybe something happened. I don't know if it's all his fault. Look, I was never a Michael Therrien fan. Anybody who listens to this for a while knows that.
I don't think anybody's ever been a fan of his.
That's the thing. I did not like him, and the fact that they were friends. Like, I just look at the energy of that locker room, and it disappeared. I think Tortorella would have got a lot more out of that group. They probably would have got them into the playoffs. And I think now it is a clear-cut talent issue, especially without a number one center. Like you said, this team is pretty much run by the young guys on it. And I include Konechny in that. A lot of the guys in their mid-20s and up, outside of Konechny, they're not the most effective players offensively. Kevin Hayes is having an offensive year, but has been worse defensively than he's ever been. So at the same time, I kind of get that. I like the Torts is pushing it. That's how I saw this season to begin with. Take all the assets you have, push them, and make them more valuable. Drop their value and this team's value around the entire league, where it looks like we produce bad players. Now, all of a sudden, we have Noah Cates, who looks like the second coming of Sean Couturier, at least defensively. Like, we have guys who can stick out. Morgan Frost, all of a sudden, is relevant again. Like, I think this really was the goal. And a lot of
you want to raise some of your assets and their value. Right?
Go ahead. But it's not even just that, too. It's also like you have a new guy coming in, a new coach coming in. And unless the GM is like, hey, I'm going to save you the trouble, I'm getting rid of everybody, I'm bringing in all new guys, and you're going to have input. Torts is the kind of guy, if you look at when he went from an assistant coach of the Rangers to Tampa Bay, from being in TSN studio to the Rangers mid-season, from going to Vancouver, then going to Columbus. Like, when he takes over, they don't make wholesale lineup changes. He says, let me see what I could get out of this group. Give me the group, okay? And let me see what I could mold and shape. Once the season is done, if it may be halfway through the season, 3/4 through the season, I'll knock on your door and I'll say, this guy's lost. Okay. He's a good kid. It's not working. He doesn't listen, doesn't know where to position himself. Get rid of him. Okay. And so you have to afford a coach like that. Because remember, Torch didn't come in and Fletcher's like, all right, this is how things are going to go. He basically said, please come here. And this is where we're at. Like, we just want you to fix things. And he's like, you're going to leave me alone? They're like, we will leave you alone. He's like, can I sometimes be mad at the media? They said, you could be mad at the media sometimes.
And there you go. But it's an evaluative period for him, right?
Exactly.
So like he needs to come and evaluate the assets that they have, see maybe what can actually fit under what he's trying to do here, obviously. And then what let's say doesn't fit, I think is where we're going next, kind of in the offseason, where you maybe look to move out some guys that maybe don't fit Tortorella's long-term vision in a sense, or what he's trying to build, at least on the ice, right?
Yeah, and who are you like? So what teams are in like your cohort group, right? In terms of like the stages of rebuilding.
Yeah.
Like I'm shocked. I knew that based on the off seasons, like Buffalo, Detroit, Ottawa, and New Jersey, we knew that they were going to really try to like real hard to be better. They were done with losing.
Mm-hmm.
And like New Jersey came out of nowhere. Buffalo, a little surprising. Ottawa, more of a disappointment considering the moves that they made. And then Detroit, they improved. But are the Flyers in that group, or are they in the group with Montreal and Columbus? And you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah,
so,
that's the tough part. The injuries have put us in a weird
like
place.
You said, with Tortorella, and this is the rub with Sanheim, is that he doesn't have much time before that freaking deal locks in. So, like, Torts have to say, like, hey, it might take me 3 years to get through to this guy. You're gonna be stuck with him, and the only way that he'll move is if he hates playing for Torts, and he'll waive. But again, this is what the guy does. The Flyers' expectations should have been very low to begin with, and I think that. It really, like the GM, and we could talk about him later, but I really think that Tortorella's in this for a while, and that he needs this period to evaluate, and he needs this period to identify his Torts has his he likes guys that are willing to run up through a wall for him. He loves that, and if you don't do it every night, he's gonna kind of say, well, you should do it every night because it'll make us a better team. So again, all part of the process. It was year one.
The tough part of arguing with Tortorella is that he's typically right. He's not 100% right, but usually the stuff that he's being a stickler on, he's probably right about it. And
like the defensive habits, like those are stuff he's preaching, the positioning, those are things that do win you games, especially if you're in a tight game or playoff hockey situations, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Steve, let me ask you this: when obviously you have the history with Torts. This is the one thing that I've noticed with Torts, and people take him very literally, and I think he is being literal, but like he evaluates things like, oh, we got a long way to go, guys. Like we're super far away. We're not good. We're not doing exactly. That's going to be his attitude pretty much all the time here, right? Like I don't see a point where this guy goes, we're like the best team in the league. Like, well, we're great and everything's awesome.
No,
it's never going to happen. He'll praise individuals and individual performances, but I feel like he's always going to say we can be better. We can.
He's going to be mad if they're up 3-0 in the second round and they lose game 4 like 5-1. He will be just as mad as he was when he loses a game. With a rebuilding team like the Flyers in it's like the 10th game of the season or even a preseason game. Some of his meltdowns that we've seen during the playoffs where he'll yell at the media because that's how competitive he is. Like every game he hates losing. He just hates losing. And it's not that he hates losing because of his ego And people always say like, oh, he's got such an ego. Like he really doesn't. Like he is just very confident in his leadership abilities. He's been doing it for about what, like 30 freaking years. He's won a Stanley Cup before. He's taken, 3 different franchises on improbable runs. I count the Columbus one because they beat freaking Tampa, in the process.
Crazy.
He beat Toronto with Columbus, playing in a small market. So again, like I think that his style is old school, and people don't like that, right? That people they get offended by it. They view him as a bully, and they just have to understand that leadership is an art. It's not a science. You could be a nice guy and the team does nothing for you. All right. And if the players buy in, and again, it all boils down to one thing, and that is the team was better this year than they were last year. You know what I mean?
They improved technically, yeah.
With less talent.
The roster, here's the most important part. The only changes made to the roster were young kids who were called up from Lehigh Valley. The Flyers did not have a busy offseason. Mm-hmm. They got D'Angelo. I think they got did they get Braun, right?
Yeah, they already had him anyway.
They brought him back, but yeah.
Yeah, they brought him back because they dealt him at the deadline. So, I'm always going to be a pro Torts guy. When the media, when people, first of all, fans of the other team, they're not supposed to like the other coach. So they can say whatever they want. Local media, sometimes they can feel a little intimidated by it. But then again, you want the potential or the possibility of an exciting press conference. Those things are so boring. And you sit there, you want to cut your wrists.
I love his press conferences.
Yeah.
I never miss them.
And I think the media, the beat writers especially, like they know within a couple of weeks, they'll know what they can and can't say. Yeah. And that sometimes the beat writers, what they'll do is, I don't speak for all of them, but I have known enough beat writers that have dealt with coaches like Torts, where they'll say, it's almost like you want to be the first one to push the right button with him. Even though he doesn't play favorites, though, it's almost like a badge of honor. Like, I got Torts to answer the question I want, because Torts, he will not answer the question you ask him. Yeah. And he'll yell at you. He might even ridicule you for asking it.
Yeah.
But if you could ask him, like, I really want to know, did you put Sanheim on the right side because you felt like he was better? If you get like, yeah, I really think that would be like, you might as well have a freaking parade to celebrate your accomplishment. You're absolutely
right about that. Because he'll go on a thing. He'll just be like, these are stupid questions, guys.
Yeah.
And then he'll be like, oh, that's a really good question. You can tell that they're like, oh, great.
It's almost like, oh my God, it's my lucky day.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Like, even I got a chance to ask him a couple questions at the game in Toronto. And one of the media guys from TSN or something asked him something about the Leafs and Sheldon Keefe as the other coach. And then Torts was just like, well, I don't even care about the other coach. Why would you ask me something like that? And I was just sitting there kind of laughing, that's Torts for you, right? You just somebody out.
Yeah. And I've, when I've been in press conferences, and I usually don't like asking questions because I'm rarely on deadline, and I'm just there to get comments about a prospect or his role or usage or some shit. But that you could tell when they're not in the mood.
Exactly. Gotta be able to feel the energy basically, or what happened in the game, let's say, right?
Yeah, you don't want to kiss their ass, but you don't want to also be antagonistic. And so, but again, this is what at the end of the day, right? Philly sports fans are very loyal. Okay, so if a coach will win with a specific group, especially if it's a group that was homegrown or mostly homegrown, and it was a rebuild situation, that is how you're going to see the change from the way that he's perceived and covered. Because at the end of the day, he bounces around a lot. Torts has never been the kind of coach to stay in one spot and be like a Cooper and say, okay, well, I've had 5 51 seasons out of 7 years with this team. He goes to a team that has problems, he fixes the problems, and then he goes on to a new problem. And maybe that's what what motivates him.
I think this is going to be his final, to your point, he said, this is my last coaching job. I think that's what he wants to do here. Is he's going to be I'm going to be the one who fixed the Flyers culture. I'm going to be the one who brought it back. to at
Yeah,
least be
and
respectable.
you know what? That's a good thing. So you take the warts, right? You take the warts. You take the freaking abrasiveness. And you take the cursing and like all this other stuff.
You see, it's obviously working with the players, right, on the ice, just in terms of like
Yeah,
this
I
last
don't
season
know
to this
where
season.
I don't know where the idea came from that you have to be nice to get results.
I
Like
think the opposite in
two
NHL
words,
and professional
Anna
sports.
Wintour. Like people watch the Devil Wears Prada. It's like, oh my god, she was so mean. Like, dude, like look at like she was like she ran Vogue. Like that's like how many people could say that? Or like now there's also I'm not saying this. You could be toxic and corrupt as a leader and be autocratic and not receive feedback from others, but you know, a lot of Torch's assistants have gone on to success, and they all speak highly of him.
Like you said, he's very fair. Like even his doghouse, it's usually a temporary one. Like if you're in his doghouse, you won't be in there long. If you
look at the last game, he benches Farabee and Sanheim in the second period, and then he plays them in the third and gives them a chance to come back. Right, so he always gives you that chance, even if he benches you. He doesn't never insert you back in. Yeah.
Benching is so like overrated by like people make such a big deal out of it. It's literally like it's a timeout. That's basically all it is. Yeah. Like so. Okay, so I'll give you an example. Like why would a player be benched? And you know the reason why I focus in on this because of the kids, and I have Instat so I could reverse and I could slow things down and like why not? And I pick up on that. Like if a prospect who's 17 is the top line player on a team and he gets benched, I want to find out what the heck happened. So I'll watch literally like, through a very fine lens, the first shift to the time that they got benched. And usually I could guarantee you 99 times out of 100, it's always trying to do too much with the puck, right? Not utilizing line mates, thinking that you could solve all the problems by it's not really being selfish or hot doggish. It's just that all these guys are freaking competitive and they want to be able to fix things. And some days their timing is off and their passes are off. And so they just decide, you know what? If the passing game ain't working, I'm going to try to. And that is what really like now, of course, if you blow a defensive assignment, if you try to make a fancy dangle play height, the line, and it leads to a 2-on-1 that results in a goal, yeah, okay. But it's always like puck possession related, poor decisions, forcing things, being too, I guess, jittery, not as poised. Whereas you have a puck, if you delayed for a second, your guy would have been open, the seam would have opened, you could have hit him with a lead pass, little things like that. So it's strategic and tactical. Like it's a lesson learned. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think that's well said. And I guess to the other side of that spectrum, strategic and tactical, probably not his best MO, but let's talk about Chuck Fletcher a little bit. He just had a season ticket holder meeting that did not go too well. I was not at it, but I just saw the video and it was circulating.
He got booed, right?
Yeah, he got booed. And then you have Steve Coates up there telling people to stay classy. You know, I feel mixed on it because on some hand, it's like, hey, it's these people's right to complain at this point.
They've paid so much money. So,
but at the same time, it does kind of hurt to watch a situation where it's like, like I get that people are angry. Maybe that's the time to do it. But, it just seems to add more into the chaos here where like, I wish the situation was just better. That's all I would have to say. It's not that I really care what happened, but it's a weird to see the GM get bullied and not bullied to get booed, and then to see that the head coach is essentially the mouthpiece for the team, which is really weird. Usually there's always a strong GM here to talk, and now that's not really the case.
It's definitely interesting. I mean, like I think obviously it speaks to the fact that the fan base has shown they really don't have a lot of faith in the GM, and the organization kind of recognizes that, obviously. So they put Tortorella there to, kind of talk to the fan base about, the vision and the future of the team, whereas you don't really see Fletcher addressing that as much, obviously, aside from like the trade deadline press conferences and things like that. But him getting booed really in general, in something like that, where it's a season ticket holder meeting, and just based on, his tenure here and his track record, I don't really blame the season ticket holders just based on the fact that they spent so much money and obviously aren't, happy with the product. So if they're going to boo, they're going to boo. Nonetheless, whether they boo or not, it's not going to change really what's happened or what could happen in the future. Like personally, if you look at his track record and the team is gone, I guess, since Fletcher's been put into place. I mean, they brought him in to kind of,
lowest.
Winning percentage ever.
Yeah.
For a Flyers GM. So that just speaks for itself, right? In history, lowest winning percentage. But I'm saying they brought him in to kind of piece together the prospects and the things that Hextall did not do well, and he's kind of gone the opposite direction where whatever was good that he left over hasn't really been capitalized on. So I just think based on that, I mean, I can't really see his tenure lasting too much longer, right?
Yeah, I feel that. Steve, I know of Fletcher. I don't think you know exactly how things have gone here, but they have degraded to a point where
you couldn't even trade JVR for a pick.
Well, I mean listen, and I was going to talk about that because there's. Before I touch on that, I will say this about Fletcher. Okay, the bottom line is very simple. 2 seasons ago or 3 seasons ago, even though it was COVID short and then returned to play, the Flyers were a cup contender. They had the points percentage, the wins, the roster, the playoff success, early round playoff success of a team that you would consider to be a cup contender. And that when the Flyers made the round robin, although that
was his first season, right, Fletcher? Yeah.
First or second.
Second.
So when you reach that level,
whole season,
where the Flyers actually had more success than I believe they had since 2012.
Yeah.
Right, when they beat Pittsburgh in round 1. So, the Flyers beat, I think it was Boston, right? Didn't the Flyers beat the Bruins in the first round? Or the
12?
No. That was
it was
2020.
Montreal,
and then they went
Islanders.
to 7 with the Islanders.
Yeah.
Okay, so they I'm sorry, the Islanders beat. I think the Islanders beat Boston.
Yeah,
but the
right.
point I'm making is that you play Game 7 technically in a second round, which is what the Flyers had not done in a very long time. That automatic, and I bought into it too. I'm like, oh my God, the Flyers, look out for them. They have to be. And then we saw in the half season or the 56 game season that it really was a mirage. That is on the GM because the GM, but not necessarily that 2021 season, but 21-22 last season, that is on Fletcher, okay? Because he identified the problem that, okay, we're not as good as we thought we were in this 56 game slate. Let's go, let's make some moves. And he made the wrong moves. And so, and the moves did not help the team, so that he had to resort to his next trump card, which was hire a new coach. And he brings in a new coach, and still, like I said, we're seeing things, but again, at the end of the day, paying a lot of money, the team is not a playoff team. So I get the booing. I totally get it. But at the same time, that he deserves a little bit of credit. I
agree.
For being patient with a lot of the kids.
This is what I said.
Yeah, being patient with the kids. How many Flyers fans were frustrated? Nolan Patrick, Allison, like they're always hurt. Everyone's hurt. Couturier's hurt. Fire the medical staff. That now, Fletcher deserves a little bit of credit because he didn't flinch. That he was like, listen, if we're going to do a rebuild and Torch is okay with it, and he promises me he's going to play the kids if they earn it, then I think we have something here. And we saw that in bits and pieces this season. But now the expectations, I think, will be higher. This can't be a 7 to 9 year thing, or like Buffalo or Edmonton before McDavid finally was able to carry them to a deep run. As far as the lack of activity at the deadline, very surprising. But I think that, I'm being honest with you, my theory, and this is just a theory, I think that JVR didn't want to leave. I think that whether he's from, because he's from the area, his family, I don't think he wanted to leave.
I don't think he wanted to leave either.
That's not a surprise to me. Yeah.
The only thing is though that the other thing that might be more realistic is that his price tag, even though it's going to be prorated, it's still high. And so you saw what teams had to do to fit these bigger names in, right? JVR we knew was like a C level, maybe a B level deadline acquisition because we knew it was going to be a busy deadline. And there's going to be a lot of names in play that teams are like, you know what, if I have a choice between Ryan O'Reilly and frickin' JVR, I'm taking Ryan O'Reilly. Or if I have a choice between Tarasenko. So maybe that like Fletcher might have had something, and that now you look at teams like Buffalo. Like why did Buffalo go out and get Greenway and not get a guy like JVR? Like why didn't Detroit? They could have used a guy like JVR. It takes two to tango, but again, like
how you couldn't move him. Yeah.
Bottom line is simple. Bottom line, I'll wrap it up. I wouldn't have booed Fletcher. I made at him about with the draft, the Ellis and Ristolainen and stuff, but I wouldn't boo him. I would say, you know what? Like, yeah, you made mistakes in the past, but this season, I would say mulligan. You know what I mean? Next season, because look at you're living in Calgary. That guy has made that every year. It's we suck, we're great. We suck every year. Every other year, it's the epitome of a roller coaster ride.
Well, and
every time I write my draft report, I have to write like state of the franchise. I've been saying this guy should get fired ever since he's Rasputin. You cannot kill him. He just comes back. And so, I don't think Fletcher's going to be like. I think Philly is the fan base a lot more demanding than in Calgary, but I just they improved like slightly. So
I think people's concern is, are we going to be in that middling area where you're not good enough to really make, even if you do make into the playoffs, you're out in the first round and you're not far.
The process.
Yeah, no, and that's where I like to think of it, is that it's more than just picks, and it's like you literally incrementally work your way up to becoming a better organization, and you add players along the way.
I mean, I like Fletcher's drafting and Flair's drafting to your point, and he's been patient with the kids. I think people are just not convinced maybe about if he can be the right guy for them just in the trade market, UFA market, negotiating and stuff like that. I don't know if they're confident, which makes sense, right?
We were saying this, Steve, we've never seen a GM not be able to trade an asset like JVR. Like that was a first for us. Is a lot. Like that was
what are his hits? So here, you guys are Flyers fans. What are like his big hits in terms of
Niskanen?
You know what I mean? Like so, like for example,
big trade basically.
Like the
Ryan Ellis trade looked good on paper, but
I didn't like it.
But like David Poile, for example, who's stepping down in Nashville. He had, when he was with Washington and when he was with the Preds, and he was with the Preds since '97, so the first year, he found a way to win trades and say, you know what, dude, he got Forsberg for Erat. You know what I'm saying?
Insane.
Or he got Mike Ridley and Kelly Miller for freaking Bob. I'm dating myself. That was a long time ago. Like he rarely lost a trade, but he won a lot of trades, big ones. So what does Fletcher have? Like as Flyers fans?
So that's exactly what I was.
He doesn't really win trades.
He
that's a problem.
Usually gets bare minimum of what you like expect. Like even the Giroux trade, the Tippett edition was great, but like we wanted more than the 2024 first round pick. We wanted another high end prospect, right? Retrospectively, it's not a bad trade, but it's just like it always is. Minimal expectation, right? Like whatever your lowest expectation
Giroux had plenty left in the tank too. Like he had a great year.
Yeah. And quite frankly, he could have kept Giroux, got the player and the pick. It's just everything has like an apology put onto it. Where like I didn't get you exactly what we wanted. And it's like, okay, in isolation, they're fine. But overall, in a long stretch, it's like we need somebody not average. We need somebody great. And that's kind of the problem. Is like we don't want to be the team with a GM who we're the ones who were left in the dust. We want the GM. We're like, how the hell did he figure out how to do that? We want some of those. We haven't had any of those. Like again, it's not that he's done everything incompetent, and some of the trades he's done are good, but not
enough wins over a combined period.
Very rarely does he win a trade. Like he even could have won the Wayne Simmons trade. And he shot himself in the foot there. He got a fourth and Ryan Hartman for Wayne Simmons. And you look at what Ryan Hartman's done. He just let Hartman go afterwards. He's just like every single time where he had a chance to kind of get more than expected, it just hasn't happened. It's been
All right, so
less.
the fact that you guys, and I'm sure the entire fan base acknowledges this, that pretty much means your perception is reality. That means that ownership is aware of this.
Yes.
And that everybody within the organization is aware of this. Now, the other thing you got to factor in, potentially, it is concerning, is that his dad was not like that.
Yes.
No, his dad
Hall
had the
of Famer.
like his
He
dad
made big trades for the Leafs. A lot of
huge. I mean, Cliff Fletcher. Like, if you're a Torontonian and you know about the Leafs history, the 92 and 93 and 94 teams, they might as well have won the cup because like everyone if you were a Leafs fan, you could have loved like 15 guys from those teams.
Wow, that's that famous call with Gretzky, right? That everybody goes back to, where he gets that high sticking penalty.
But it was just like the
but
the way
Gilmore gets it anyway.
Yeah, the way the team was built, and so and in a way like that, what the Cliff Fletcher did was able to set the conditions for the Leafs to rebuild again with the Sundin trade, and so. Having that kind of I guess legacy, living up to those standards isn't easy. And I wonder why and this is just my theory, that he doesn't want to be like his dad. Like, he's like, I'm going to do things my way and I'm going to take a more conservative approach. Like his dad would have. Now, again, I don't know what kind of relationship they have.
To that point, I think he's tried, his aggressiveness was to go all out and get Ristolainen. Again, a player I like. He's actually had a good season too. But
in the off season, though, off season when the team was already
well, but is that the player you go all out for? He went all out. He traded assets to move Ghost, but then traded more assets for a guy who's going to be a UFA and D'Angelo. It's just. That's what I mean. Every time he's paying the most, that he needs to pay. When he had to bring in Kevin Hayes, he paid a fourth, which I kind of liked. I like the aggressive nature of it. He paid a fourth, got the player in here, and then signed him for max value. It's just for the highest cut. It's just every single step along the way, we're paying the most. When it's in a trade or a free agency, the internal negotiations, he hasn't been bad. Signing Couture's contract, Farabee. He's not completely incompetent here, but it's just we're looking for some wins. Say what you will about Hextall and whether you liked him here or not, but when he made a trade, Flyers won that trade pretty much every single time. He's so stingy that you couldn't negotiate with him really otherwise. He's one of the only people I ever saw win a trade with Yzerman, right? He got TK and Gudis for Coburn. For Coburn, right? It's a great trade for the Flyers, and one where they flipped Gudis for Niskanen. If you think about Niskanen and TK for Coburn, I mean, it's a great value.
Sure.
Yeah, but again, Hextall had his own problems, but Fletcher hasn't done that. And I think that's the problem. Is you combine that with a losing record.
Frustration, obviously, for the fan base, probably organization as well, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to numbers at the sheer end of the day. And how do you, if they're going to do this rebuild process, how do you have Chuck Fletcher sell that?
Yeah, especially the guy who's kind of maybe put them in this predicament, you could say, based off where
he's had some bad luck, but
yeah, you got to be able to make your own luck sometimes.
That division is,
right?
listen, here's the other thing.
Murderer's row.
That division is murder. And so
although we get Bedard,
the hope and salvation, I think, for the Flyers would be that we're finally, after almost 20 years, we're finally seeing what might be the end of the Pittsburgh, Washington, every 50 wins every year, 100 points, even though that, deep run playoff success hasn't been as prevalent, I guess, as it was in the early stages. But that might, and then you could throw the Islanders in that mix too. If the Islanders, Penguins, and Caps are dead, right? And we know all three weak farm systems, all traded high picks, all loaded up on veterans. The Penguins just extended to keep Crosby, Malkin, and Letang together. If this backfires, again, everything goes in cycles. If this backfires for those three teams, the Flyers are already way ahead of them in terms of stocking up a farm system, letting kids play, letting kids be in a top 4 role or a top 6 role. So that in itself, and to a degree, Columbus and Montreal as well, if you want to add them in that the Flyers might be the fifth, I guess the fifth up and coming team in the East, behind Detroit, Ottawa, Buffalo, and New Jersey. That what we saw out of Tortson and Fletcher's group this year was promising. Who's to say that they can't do what Yzerman did and spend on maybe like 2 UFAs who are legit name recognition, but results they deliver on results, and then you might be 15 points better than you were a year ago, and then that helps Fletcher kind of say, hey, see, look, I told you. It's going to take longer than we thought, but we're on the way up.
Yeah. So let's move into kids, because I think that's going to be the brunt of the rest of this episode here. Flyers made a recent signing of Will Zmolek, a 6'4", 210-pound defenseman, right-handed defenseman from Bemidji State. I think I'm saying that right.
Sure.
Bemidji, thank you. Former Flyers Joel Otto and Matt Reed coming from over there. Reed notoriously coming over, I think at 24 years old, very similar age, and came in, had a lot of success here, especially for an undrafted free agent. Put up a really good career as a middle 6 forward, played a lot with Sean Couturier, had a few 20-goal seasons. So I don't know enough about Zmolek. I've seen some things. His numbers seem to be decent. But I think probably more to look to see if he's a two-way defenseman, in the sense that maybe he can play defensively well, maybe move the puck up the ice, with some gusto. But do you know anything about him, Steve? You had a chance to watch him?
Yeah, sure. So Bemidji State's it's even though it's in Minnesota, they don't really play that tough of a schedule, and so that program's always been one of the better ones. And that, in their bracket. And he is their number 1 defenseman. Now, his dad was a top 10 pick, Doug Zmolek. He was a Minnesota North Stars draft pick, top 10, Minnesota guy, defensive defenseman, physical. I'm talking about the father now. And then we bounced around. Then he had to retire early because of injuries. But Will is one of his, I think he's got like 3 or 4 sons who play Division I college hockey. And or had at some point. And Will is definitely more offensively gifted and skilled, I guess. I don't want to knock the dad, because you have to be skilled to be a 7th overall pick. But in terms of like his role and usage, like he's like the number 1 guy who runs the point in the power play. He's the number 1 guy in the penalty kill. He plays like 20 to 25, sometimes 27 minutes a night. Defensively very good. Positioning, listen, his dad has taught him well. He's mature, he's poised, but my thing with him is really offensive related. He's got a very, it's weird. His shot is his release is lightning quick. He loves to shoot the puck and fit it through. So he's got a good through percentage. But the game that I watched, it seemed like the power play ran through him for the most part, at least. So I don't know though, the right side isn't all that deep for the Flyers,
right.
At least in the farm system level. So you have Adder there. I think Wiley, right? He's still with the team,
He's still there.
he's a Lehigh Valley mainstay. I don't know, and I've been rooting for the kid. But you got guys like Samson. So the right, and he could play the left side too. But I think that. Andre is another one. I think he's a lefty who could play the right side. So I don't know. I think it's more like insurance. I don't see him being a guaranteed lock to go to Reading. The
Reading or Lehigh?
No, Reading. I mean, like
ECHL.
Because the AHL right now it's a little crowded, even with the call ups. That I think Lehigh Valley's set right on defense. I mean, they have. Yenning's up there now.
Yes.
What's it called? Zamula. We thought he might make the team potentially. He's there.
They did let Hoegberg out of his contract.
So he's gone.
So they did free up a spot there.
And they're going to have a wave of guys coming in now. now. Guys that we've been waiting. I think Zanetti might be finally old enough to play. Well, he's always been eligible because he's a European, but I don't know Andrea's situation. But even still, the addition of a player like this, I think it's more like modern day defenseman, size, could skate, okay, but has those two-way abilities. Like, he's not just effective in one area of the game. He's good on the penalty kill. He's good on the power play. He's good on breakouts. So we'll see. He's never probably been in such a competitive environment as he is now, because around him, he's an undrafted free agent. Mm-hmm. I think he's like, is he a 99 or a 2000?
99. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's almost he's 24 if he already turned it. So he's going to have to compete against, second and third round picks, guys who've been in the organization for a while. But to answer your question, he's basically a two-way defenseman with skill and size.
And did you say that he could skate well?
He's okay. No, I mean, he's not like a Brady Shea where he's like, 6'4" and could skate like pretty well, but he's more like he's mobile. You know what I mean? Where like he will go not necessarily like end to end, but he can carry the puck himself through the neutral zone and get to the line, delay a little bit, and then help set up the possession. So escapability, he's pretty quick in corners. Again, I haven't seen like every single game of his. Sure. I only watched a couple, but he's when I saw him, usually what happens with these guys is that word spreads. Right now, it could be an agent, it could be the father with his NHL connections. But even with NHL connections, the scouts will have to go and confirm or deny. You know what I mean? And when you watch these mature defensemen in college who are juniors or seniors, and they're the number one, they're problem solvers, you say, well, this isn't, the level of competition isn't all that great. Let's just give him a chance. He might flourish being in a tougher environment. Yeah. If he doesn't, you gave it a shot. It's
a low risk, high reward type thing, right? Wait and see, and it could pay off.
The Flyers did their due diligence. Like they've spoken to coaches, they've spoken to opposing coaches, they watch film, they talk to the parents. Like it's a whole process. It's not like, oh, he had a good game, sign him. You know what I mean? And
yeah, of course.
It's just not the realities. But I think a low risk move. But again, it just creates competition, and that's what you want.
Sounds like a potential bottom pairing defenseman in the NHL, kind of a guy you'd want that can eat up like 15 to 18 minutes a night.
Has a bit of an offensive touch, like you're saying.
Yeah, like it all depends on. Well, therein lies the rub with these kids, because especially with defensemen, at least, is that when they get down to that level, for years they were always the number one guy on controlling the puck 25 to 27 minutes a game. But now you ask them to play 9 to 13 minutes a night, and it's not because of their skill or lack thereof. It's because of just the pecking order. Like you joined us, we already had guys here. And
how do they adjust to that, really, right?
How do you adjust to that? Exactly. How do you say, oh, I'm better than this guy, I want the puck? Or do you just say, you know what, I'm just freaking happy to be here, and if the coach wants me to be a defensive defenseman, I'll be a freaking defensive defenseman. And so that's why I think a lot of young defensemen go through that like transitional period where they're like, all right, what am I? What am I going to be now? Like I got what I want. I'm in the NHL. Or I guess if you look at Smolak's case, the AHL, because there's no undrafted free agent. There's no guarantee you're going to get an AHL contract.
Right.
You know what I mean? What you're going to want to see is, well, I don't know where he's going to end up. Is he already with Lehigh Valley? Did he already show up?
I don't know if he's with the team, but we haven't heard. Most likely he's going to end up with Lehigh Valley. He's got I think 20 games, and then his ELC kicks in next year.
Yeah, so it would be pretty messed up if they give him an NHL opportunity before some of the guys that have been waiting a lot longer. But it could also mean that they intend on promoting guys from Lehigh Valley, or they're anticipating a prospect, but specifically for Lehigh Valley to make the team next year. So that way you could fill that in.
Well, I'm sorry to cut you off, but that's a pretty good point, because Ronnie Attard is or Ronnie Attard is actually, I think he's a 24 now. He's had a good season in Lehigh. He could be one of those names that they're thinking about. Him or Zamula.
Yeah, and he's a college guy too. So like with a big body. And like I said, shooting the puck is an added specialty. So maybe like they could view him as a potential. He's not like. Well, I don't know how mean Addard is now because I know he's had was it injuries. But like I know Addard's delivered some pretty big hits. I never saw enough of Smolak that he delivered big hits like his father used to. But again, I running the power play, being on the point, passing the puck, receiving the puck cleanly. That's the stuff you could expect out of Smolak next year in Lehigh Valley if that's where he stays.
Well, we'll get a good look at him. So let's move on and let's get into the fun one here because this is somebody that obviously everybody wants to know about. He just finished his college season with Boston College. He is their top player. Cutter Gauthier finished the season with, I think, 16 goals, 18 assists in I forget the amount of games, but definitely over a point per game player. Led his team in points and in goals. And I mean, obviously, it looks like a gamer. Steve, some insights. Obviously, I think we talked about him after the draft, but how's he looking so far in NCAA?
Well, transitional period for BC because Jerry York, stepped down, and so that's like a, I mean, what would it be? What would be like it's like Jack Parker leaving BU, or if Belichick leaving the Patriots. I mean, it was a huge deal. So he steps into this situation, and I never had an issue with Gauthier, by the way. I'm just saying is like if you would want to find something to nitpick about his draft season, it was that he was on a top line, a very potent top line with Logan Cooley, and that as his center, and that you see what Logan Cooley's doing as a freshman in Minnesota, and with Team USA, that you're like, well, Logan Cooley is the bus driver, but there was always a sense that Gauthier, it wasn't that he was a passenger, he was just being unselfish, and that when given the opportunity, and I remember playing wing to boot. So that if Gauthier could be turned into a center and he's allowed to dictate the tempo and the pace and the style and everything that his line does, fifth overall pick. So you'd expect that out of a kid, when he shows up to college. But he had a lot of pressure on him to live up to those expectations, and he has. I mean, he is. You say he's the best player for BU. He's like the only player on BU. And BC, I'm sorry. Yeah. And I don't want to knock some of the guys they have down there because they do have a couple of guys that I like, defensemen as well. But he is when other teams are wargaming BC and they're doing their prep work and their pre-scouting, they're focusing on him, and they couldn't stop him. Like whether it's his size, his stick handling, his IQ, his playmaking, just everything that you would want out of a top 5 pick. So if you're a numbers type. I'm going to assume his possession numbers must have been through the roof because he really, the way he skates and how nimble he is. So he can just hang on to the puck and like dudes are bouncing off him. He never seemed to get tired. He never seemed to like go through the motions. Like you got consistent efforts from him, which is another huge feather in his cap. So Flyers fans might have been a little concerned. Like, oh, well, is he a wing? Is he a center? Like, what is he? He's a center. He's going to be a center, and I know that it's a big problem right now with the team. The question is, like if they were able to, how quickly is his transition going to be from college to the pros? Does he need a year in the AHL? Could he pull a Zegras and leave college after one season? Go and just maybe have one season, maybe in particular next season, where it's like half AHL, half NHL, and then. He's like a Mason McTavish or a Zegras or a Matty Benias, you know what I mean? Where they just step in eventually, and that's it. And they are now where you expected them to be at the NHL level, top 9, top 6, sometimes in some cases top line. But he's very impressive prospect.
Do you think he was worthy of that top 5?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, well, look at the guys picked after him. First of all, if you can play that game, like look at the guys picked after him. Now, Jiricek is having a one of the better under 18 or under 19 seasons in the AHL that I've seen.
Yeah, really good.
Yeah, so if you want to look at numbers strictly and not not really contextualize it, you could say, well, Jiricek had the advantage of playing against men for 2 years. So when he comes to North America, and he want, a lot of these European kids don't want to go to North America. If they want to stay in Europe, and they like mom's home cooking, or they have a girlfriend there. This guy's like, and Nemets too deserve credit. They both said, nope, we're going right to North America, we're going right to the AHL. And the AHL this year was great prospect-wise because you got a lot of high picks playing in there, or guys that really lit up junior. So that would be fair if you're a Jiricek guy and not a. But as far as every other forward, I mean, you know what I mean? Like he's doing exactly what we expected out of him.
Yeah, he's got 34 points in 30 games. So like Yariv was saying, over a point a game. And just, I think the most impressive thing is for a guy his size, he really shows that he can move out there. Like even today, in the game that was going on, I saw a clip online where he's carrying the puck up the ice and creates a really good chance and gets a shot off. Just with his size, he's kind of like fighting through guys, almost just carrying the puck up and just showing, like, even though he's a bigger guy, he really carries the puck with speed, and then obviously a shot, lots of velocity. So I think from a Flyers perspective, if you're a fan, I mean, what's not to love about a big guy who can really skate and shoot the puck and is a center? I think that's really what the team
and a setup
is looking
guy
for, right?
and be a setup guy. So let's just say, think about, like, so many times we see these kids promoted and they have to play out of position, right? And so, like, we saw that with the Devils farm system, and really to a degree with the Flyers as well, because all those deep drafts that Hextall had eventually created a little bit of a backlog, and you had guys down in Lehigh Valley, centers playing wings playing center, right defenseman playing on the left side. It's sometimes you just accept what's given to you, and sometimes coaches do that, and the player dev guys, they will purposely put a kid out of his comfort zone and see how he adapts. And if he complains, he feels like he's entitled and a prima donna, that's going to impact how he's viewed within the organization, and it might even impact his play. Gauthier will not be problematic. Like, if you want to say, hey, you know what? I want you to come up and be our fourth line center, he could do that. I think I said with you guys that when the NTDP had 5-on-3 penalty kills, he was even though he played wing,
he was
on the
center
top
on
line,
the PK, right?
they would have him center the 5-on-3 PK. So, I mean, look, that's all. When I saw that, I'm like, he's going to be fine, because there's no, like, oh, well, let me try to cherry pick this stat or try to, like, find out if there's a way that he's benefiting from somebody. No.
What's your thoughts, Steve? I'm wondering, like, do you think he's going to sign once the season's up, or do you think he'll go back to college, just based on like your perspective?
I don't think. All right, so here's again. I don't want to speak. I don't know the kid. I don't know his advisors. I don't know his father, his coaches, anything. I don't think it's not like he's like a Boston area guy with like deep BC roots, and like, his dad went to school there, and I think that the purpose of going to Boston College was to grow as an individual, set the foundation for a really good education, getting a degree, etc. But also going to a known program that has churned out quality NHLers who did not spend the 4 full years there. And, we're talking about guys like look at the BC has developed and created. I mean, you go all the way back to Brian Leach and Craig Gianni, and then you go up to freaking Gianta, and then you go through Kevin Hayes and Chris Kreider, and I mean, like,
Gaudreau.
Johnny Gaudreau. So I think that was part of it. He's definitely not going to be there more than 2 years, though. If he has another season like this, the Flyers really have no choice. They have to almost basically strong arm the kid and say, listen, we'll set you up for the online courses. You could do them in the break room. You know what I mean? Like, you are going to be a Flyer. Like, in a lot of these kids, like, it's basically like a sales pitch. They'll bring the kid to the arena. They'll put him on in the jersey. They do this after the draft, I think. They'll put his name on the scoreboard. They'll simulate crowd noises and, like, try to get him all, like, and a lot of these young kids, like, with all due respect to Conkey Forum in the Heights and at Plymouth, USA Hockey Arena, like, there's nothing like 18,000, 19,000 plus screaming your name and wearing your jerseys in the stands. And so I think that's going to be part of it. He's definitely not going to be, if he has another year like he had this year, next year, I mean, I think he should leave now. But,
it's really interesting about what you said about not him having no roots there. And on top of that, you throw the fact then that they're not having a great season. I don't know if that matters. He is.
Well, look at Michigan. Look at Michigan with Benias and Power and Johnson. They all could have been in the NHL last season. And they decided, nope, we want to win as a group. And
I think that factors in, right? If you have a really great team like that, you might want to buy in and be a part of that program.
That's not the case with Boston College, though. Boston College, they have some pretty good recruits coming in. I think, Cole Eiserman, I think, is going to BU. But still, BC's like about another 2 years off. I don't think Gauthier is going to be a part of that, though, obviously.
Yeah, and I took a look at the rest of the league, and he is like I think the youngest, most successful player like in that division. Maybe there's one other, but he's clearly in a different class.
Forward-wise, yeah, like Lane Hudson.
Yeah, as a forward,
Lane Hudson is probably right. He might win the Hobie Baker, but he's like a small playmaking defenseman. But as far as like the NTDP forwards are usually the cream of the freshman class. If that's where they go, and like you said, and when Hockey East, he's clearly the rookie of the year or freshman of the year. I forgot what they give out.
Yeah, well, it's noticeable, and I can't wait to see him. So we'll see what happens. I suspect that the Flyers will probably try to get him over, and it's really kind of up to him whether he's willing to. But I think the Flyers would be happy to pull him over here, put him in the AHL if they have to. But you want him playing against men. He's big.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. But look at like Luke Evangelista. I mean, this is just a random prospect reference, but Luke Evangelista, was the second round pick of the Preds in 2020. He played for the London Knights, so good program. He absolutely destroyed junior hockey. He's an AHL rookie this year. He's like, I think, second or third in AHL rookie scoring pretty much the whole season. And then the Preds, they're kind of like in a similar situation like the Flyers to a degree. They call him up and he scores like big goals. And so, if you make room, I'm sorry, you don't necessarily have to make room and really shuffle like plays around to make that happen, i.e., have Gauthier make his NHL debut, and burning the level of the year of the ELC. Obviously it's not going to happen this year, but I mean next year you want to get him locked into the program. You know what I mean? You don't want to run the risk of Hockey East is a physical conference like most college hockey conferences.
I think that one. I think that one might come down to Torts, whether Torts feels he's ready or not.
I think Torts is going to love him. I think Torts is going to love him,
and that's what I mean. And if Torts says, "Oh, I can use this guy and I can play him in the NHL," they're not going to be like, "Oh, no, maybe he should just stick in college hockey." They're going to be like, "Okay, if Torts can use him and he wants to come, we're going to use him."
Yeah, you also have to factor in that, like, they might consider him like the heir apparent to Couturier, like similar play. Like,
we don't know what's going to happen to Couturier at this point.
But you see what I'm getting at, though? Like, let's just say Couturier is still part of the organization. He's still, like, involved with the team. Yeah. So it's like, usually I'm just thinking out loud here, but like, if Couturier has to unfortunately retire early because of his health issues, that he'll stay with the team and he could be like an assistant and he could help, because I like the stylistically they're very similar. You know what I mean? In terms of like what like the skill set that they bring, the two-way acumen, the face-offs, like little things like that. And I think actually that Gauthier might even have a head start, because unlike he didn't play in the Q. No disrespect to the Q, but
much weaker league.
Yeah, weaker league, but not just that. Is like Gauthier at 19 is on the younger end of the freshman class, right? So there are like 22-year-old freshmen in college who played 3 years in the USHL because they wanted to do 4 years of high school, and it's like, hey, I'm gonna go, and they know that they could play in college for 4 years, not worry about paying for a thing. The only difference is they won't get any money. But the Gauthier held his own against 22, 23. Like today, you have to put those 31 to 32 points of that point per game average in context, because
you played older guys. Yeah,
it's not 19 to 20. It's not 18 to 20 or 17 to 20. It's like 18 to like 26.
Yeah,
and 27 is sometimes.
No, and that's huge because the physicality. That's why I would like to see even if he plays in the AHL, fine. You're playing against men. You know, you got to deal with that strength, the better competition.
Also, playoff run potentially for the Phantom, so that could be a good experience for him.
Yeah. I think that Gauthier, by the midway point of next season, will be an impact NHL player. He might not be setting the world on fire. Now, the only thing that you have to consider that might impact that is if the Flyers win the lottery or they're drafting first, second, or third. And because they have avoided center ice, you have to entertain. Like, you can't just say, well, we have Gauthier, so I'm not going to draft Fantilli. Like, no. You know what I mean? Or Bedard, for that matter. Or Leo Carlson, who's a center. Or Dalibor Dvorsky, who's a center. All these big-time centers that are available for the draft. So, anyway, the bottom line is, like, he had a great season. Be very happy with it. If they're Flyers fans who are disappointed in it, you have to state your case and say, well, I wanted this guy. Well, like I said, aside from Jiricek,
most is just the Jiricek. That's the complaints. Is that people, you know, they want to trade Provorov and wish that Jiricek was here to succeed him. That's the fantasy that's been going on. I mean,
listen, Jiricek is a really good player, but, you know, like, does he really? I don't know. It's a fair argument. I'm going to be honest with you. It's completely fair, but at the end of the day, one's a forward and a potential number one center. The other one is a defenseman, potential number one defenseman. There's no formula that says you have to get like the
They're
one center beats the one defenseman.
Choices, really. So
like you have number one, like really good number one centers on bad teams, and you have number one defensemen on really bad teams. Like there's no guarantee that it's going to develop into success on the at the NHL level. But still, it's a debate, and we'll probably be having it for the next 10 to 15 years. You wanted to get to the point though where Flyers fans like we like our guy, we're happy where we got him, and if they watched Boston College this year, they should be saying that. So
well, I don't think a lot of them did, but they'll see him soon enough. So let's talk about one more Flyer, and then let's get on to the NHL draft preview because we're going pretty long here.
Okay.
I did want to talk about Emil Andre. I think he's a guy, you mentioned him earlier. He's a guy who I think could be part of this, I guess, rebuild process, but I think the Flyers probably will try to bring him over in the offseason. It seems that way to me. You just look at the bodies, the contracts, the defensemen that are locked up. And he's a guy, I don't know if it's going to serve him too much more to stay over there. And they just brought over Yinning, and he's had a really good season in the AHL. So what do you think about Emil Andre? And you mentioned him here in the past of what he can do. But I do see him being like an impact AHL player immediately if he comes over.
Here's the bottom line with Andrea. Forget about the skill and the points, the shots, power play, quarterback. That's fine. The key takeaway from his season this year was that HV71 was a very proud and historic organization. They got relegated a couple of years ago, right? 2 years ago, they did not. They were basically the worst team in the SHL, and they got bumped down to the other. Imagine the NHL did that, like, freaking Montreal last year. Like, oh, you're going to the AHL, and we're going to bring up, I mean, that's how basically
that'd be works. Crazy, yeah. It's almost like the Premier League. So
Andrea, as one of the top, like, cornerstone future pieces for that organization, he went through the adversity of. It's embarrassing. It was really embarrassing because HV71, I think they won the title in 2017. So to get relegated within 2 or 3 years after that, very embarrassing. He was part of that transition, if you want to call it that. And then what happened like about last week or 10 days ago, they just made the playoffs in the SHL. And so it's not only did they restore their, I guess, credibility, they still could have missed the playoffs, just not get relegated, but they made the playoffs. They've been very good this year. And he's basically been their number 3 all year long. 21 to 25 minutes a game. He hits. The knock on him has always been he's short and he's not, let's say, an explosive straight line skater, but he's a pro's pro. He's a mature kid. He plays an adult game. Listen, like I said, that's a proud organization. They're not just going to hand those kinds of those minutes to just anybody and say, we ran out of space. We ran out of we no longer have anybody to replace him, so let's just put the kid in. No, HV71 had the opportunity to go out and get older veteran guys, just like in the NHL. They decided, nope, we're going to stick with this kid. And much like he did in the Allsvenskan, much like he did in the J20, he's been really one of their best plays this season. So the transition should happen. because you want to see what he could do at the NHL level. You want to see what he could do really at the AHL level. But as far as his Swedish career, like keep an eye on his postseason because it's his first. Like you want to talk about the World Juniors, and I'm fine, but you wear that jersey for 3-4 years, and your team finally makes the playoffs. You want to see how he performs under that kind of pressure, right? He's going to be logging a lot of minutes. He's going to be faced off against top lines and second lines and power play, penalty killing, etc. So, that left side is loaded. Well, not loaded, but it's a lot of bodies there. But I think that he's one of the guys that the Fly is going to be interested in because again, development's been great.
Do you think his size will be an issue transitioning to the AHL from the SHL?
Nice physical. He's physical. He delivers a beautiful hip check too. So it's not like he's I don't want to go in the corners because like that's what you got to worry about size. If you want to like really really like nitpick, you could say, well, like clearing guys in front of the net. This kid is a tank though. He's like
strength for his size for being like 5'8".
Yeah, he's like 5'9", but like 185 or 90. He's thick, muscular kid. And again, it all like you could watch film on this kid. You could criticize his shortcomings. But to me, the fact that he has a coach who's got a lot of pressure on him to say like, no, I'm sticking with you, and he's stuck with him. His role has not really changed. The only time he goes down to the J20 level is if they need help. Like, hey, we need a big win. Like, you come and like I think a couple of times he did that. Maybe felt last year, 2 years ago. So yeah, I'm not saying that he's going to be the next coming of Doug Crossman or Mark Howell or any guys like that. But he was a high pick, second round pick in a pretty deep forward centric draft. I believe I had him as a late first round pick. So to get him in round 2, I thought was pretty good value for the Flyers. But again, like it's all about progression, right? Yeah, these guys, they can put up points anywhere they go because they're that skilled, but it's the team game, handling key responsibilities, delivering in those situations. That's why you got to like a guy like Andre.
It's good feedback. I guess real quick, I do want to add this one in here because nobody really knows anything about him, but Alexis Gendron, he's been scoring at a ridiculous pace.
Marty Gendron's son as well.
Yeah, he did get traded halfway through the season, and his production was very slow, and then that disappeared, and now he's at almost a goal a game. What is the story? I mean, he was a very late round pick. I've seen him in training camp, and it was very apparent that I'm like, this guy already has an NHL shot. What is it with this guy? What can we expect?
Okay, well, so the trade to Gatineau was huge for him because Gatineau, just like any CHL team, if they think that they have a shot at a Memorial Cup, it's a big money maker for them, so they will trade like this trade deadline in the Canadian Hockey League, not just for the Quebec League and the Western League and also in the OHL. Everyone just arms race. So it's kind of like similar to what we saw in the NHL. Yeah. All the big boys, it was like, let's get the best player from this team, that team. So Gatineau is loaded, okay? And they have guys like Riley Kidney, a Canadians, a second rounder from 2021. I think they've won like 15 straight or 13 straight. But the thing about the only reason why I would like temper, excitement and maybe is just because that team is so skilled and high powered and deep that he's open a lot. And he's not making a mistake, though. That's where you got to give him credit. He's open a lot. It's not like necessarily that he's a wing because he's on the smaller side. It's not like he's the kind of wing who is tasked with driving his line or creating. He doesn't really, he'll go to the net, but there's another guy on his line that'll do that. So they know of his shot. The goalies know of his shot. The other coach knows of his shot. So they're like, just get open. And Riley Kidney is a fantastic playmaker. And so it's basically like video game type numbers. He had I think 4 goals, a couple of
numbers. So
ridiculous. So he does have the benefit of playing for a really good team. but you still got to finish your chances. And he's overpowered goalies. So goalies have like beaten him, like they've made the right read and they were anticipating the seam pass and they've beaten him to the spot. Whereas like he's releasing it and the goalie's already set and he'll still power through them. But again, like it doesn't really matter at this point where he was drafted. I don't care if he was a 2nd-round pick or a 6th-round pick. It doesn't matter. What does matter is that he was given an opportunity and he's taken it and ran with it. Now, the question, though, is like they essentially replaced him. I think he's a right wing, though. They replaced him. They replaced Connor McClennon because Connor McClennon was like almost like a similar player. And I still to this day don't know why the Flyers were so willing to get rid of him because, again, he's like one of the top goal scorers in the WHL, or they'll be on the smaller side. But hey, if you could say, hey, we're going to go for the other guy instead, Gendron's living up to the expectations. I mean, that kid's crazy. He always scores.
Crazy stats, right? Like with Gatineau since the trade, he has 26 goals in 25 games. So to do that at any level is impressive. Like especially for a 7th-round pick too.
And the other thing is that the games are meaningful because Gatineau is battling with Sherbrooke for the first place, like Sherbrooke, Gatineau, Halifax, and Quebec, right? Halifax, Quebec in one conference, Sherbrooke and Gatineau. They are like basically tied in points. And they've been like I think Gatineau had like a 15-game winning streak. And then Sherbrooke was like 13-0-1.
So all these games are meaningful. They're kind of battling for position. So
exactly.
It's big stakes for him to perform.
Yeah. So there's a very good chance that you're going to see Gendron in the Memorial Cup because
cool.
And so 7th-round freaking pick, and you got and in his draft -1 season or draft +1 season, he's basically on pace for 55, 60 goals or like 55. But a lot of it is, like I said, it's coming in crunch time and down the stretch.
Yeah, and he could be an interesting player down the line. I mean, I think expectations are still pretty low, but it's one of those big swing type of picks. It seems like, he could break out and be a goal scorer in the NHL, or he could, be Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Look at Desnoyers. Yeah. Desnoyers was literally a 7th-round pick.
You might as well take those swings.
Well,
when
he was.
You have them,
no,
right?
I think Desnoyers was fifth
round pick.
5th round pick.
So yeah,
splitting hairs, but still.
Yeah.
He was I think the last pick of that they had in that draft. I remember seeing him like listed at the bottom of something. But anyway, he like I said, a smaller guy, Quebec League. Is he benefiting from his line mates? I think he was playing in Moncton, right? Yeah. So it's like, no, he goes to the AHL, has like basically like a 30-goal season, or would have paced out to a 30-goal rookie season in the AHL, almost at least, so 25 goals, and he already made his NHL debut. Now when they drafted Desnoyers on day 2 in 2020, and really no one knew who the hell he was, and you said, hey, he's going to be in the NHL playing in the freaking orange and black in exactly,
it's great value
2.5 years, you'd be like, oh, you're crazy.
It's great value, like for where they picked him and just what he's done. And he's pretty much on pace to have the record for goal scoring as a rookie in Lehigh Valley. So that's crazy if you think about that, right? Like think about all the good players who've played for the Phantom.
Yeah, and you look at Tyson Forrester, the 1st-round pick from that same draft, I believe the same draft, and he's outpaced him in goals. I mean, they're both battling.
And Forster's been good too. So it's not like Forster's like like
exactly.
Like it's just one of those things where like, it all goes back to what I said about competition. You create. It doesn't matter once you go to that development camp. Once you go to the AHL, where you got drafted gets thrown out the window. It's all about what have you done for me lately,
exactly,
and how you perform and how receptive you are to criticism, etc.
Perfect. And what a great transition into where you were drafted. So let's get into the final segment and let's get into the NHL draft. So right now, as we speak, the Flyers, I think, are slated for the 8th spot in the lottery draft. We'll see where they end up picking. Again, they could fall. We don't really know. Run Tankathon as much as you want, but at this point, nobody has any idea who's going to be taking at where in this draft, and we don't know how things will shift. So there is top 10. This is obviously a very historic draft. It seems to me like could be that Bedard could be the best goal scorer in the league at some point. I mean, look at what McDavid is doing right now, and a guy like Bedard's outpacing him. But beyond that, obviously, there's a slew of talented players, and I'd like to, you can just give us the rundown of your top 10, but I also want to focus on like anybody who's rising. And the one thing I want to take away from this, or what I would hope, is that beyond the guys that everybody knows, the Carlson, the Fantilli, the Bedard, the Michkov, if the Flyers do end up picking at 7, 8, 9, wherever, I'd like people to walk away with this understanding that there are still star players available. They might not be ready, year one, right? They might need time, like a Cutter Gauthier. But love to hear, what else is out there, because from what I've seen, this is an extremely impressive forward crop, especially at the first half of this draft, at the top of this draft.
I think one of the best is probably 2003, right? That was like one of the most historic drafts, is kind of being dubbed as kind of similar to that.
Marc-Andre Fleury was taken. Oh, no, was it Stahl?
Yeah.
Stahl was taken, right? First overall.
Fleury went first. Stahl was like was the first forward taken. There was a lot of like drama with the trades in Florida.
Yeah. But Steve, you want to give us a breakdown? Like, love to hear your top 10 and I guess what you think the Flyers should go for if they end up drafting, kind of where they're listed. And if they get lucky,
Yeah, well, I would say that the best, the closest example to the strength of this draft is 2015. And that 2015 draft, the Flyers had a good one, okay? That they were able to get Provorov and get Konechny, right? And so and it's just, regardless of what they did after that, you get those two guys, you get a number one defenseman who proved himself to be number one defenseman at a young age. And then, one of your better point producers and a hardworking guy, leads by example type in Konechny. But this draft has that billing. And the reason why is all these kids, and I'm not making this up now, without getting into any little sidebar topics, it's that I don't like, once again, how people are trying to find faults in these kids, where the reality is that there's really nothing. It's just a waste of time, because
they're also good, right?
there's no divisive prospect this year. The Michkov stuff was made up. The last year, Brad Lambert was divisive. To a degree, like Noel Gunler was divisive in his draft. Like, there's always going to be one forward who's like, consensus top 10, top 15. So let's try to find something wrong with them. Good luck finding anything wrong with these kids. And the best part about the World Juniors is that for the first time in a very long time, not a single one of the top draft prospects who played the World Juniors had the kind of tournament that you would say, oh, I don't know. I remember like with Askarov and his glove hand, with Ray Ferraro obsessed with his glove hand. Meanwhile, Askarov's one of the best goalies in the AHL. So again, it's just a stupid tournament. But on top of all that, though, big picture wise, a lot of these top kids are the best players on their team. The WHL at one point this season, the first 5 top scorers in the WHL were all first year draft eligibles. I don't remember ever seeing that. Where you had Bedard, Benson, Crystal, I think Riley Height, and I think maybe Nate Danielson or Cohen Zima. So like, imagine that. Like, I can't recall, and I keep all types of records, and I couldn't find that. So it is a special draft. The only issue that might arise is that because it wasn't necessarily full of high caliber defensemen to begin with, and one of them, Cam Allen, really dropped down because he just didn't really have that good of a season, that, we're seeing now defensemen kind of like being elevated, but it's like, you know what? These forwards are kind of special. And why would you like run the risk of going for a defenseman, especially if you have a need? Like, you could still address the defense in the later rounds. And so I think it might be like 2020, where we had a first round that was about 75% forward. But it's also something we haven't had in a while, which is a deep goalie draft. So there's a lot of goalies, okay? Bjarnason and Ratzlaff in the WHL. The kid, oh my God, the Czech kid in the USHL. But anyway, there's Augustine. There's a lot of kids. Zaravlov or Zergalov, the Russian kid. You have maybe that instead of having, let's say, 10 defensemen, you'll have it's like 5 defensemen, maybe even 3 goalies, which we haven't done since I think 2005. A lot of things to like about this draft, obviously, but as far as the overall, like, what are we going to get? What are we going to look at? You're going to want to see results like 2003 and 2015, where those kids just showed up. Obviously, the 03 class had the buffer because of the canceled season, whereas the 15 kids, a lot of them just showed up within a year. Like Rantanen, Maya, forget about McDavid and Eichel, like Marner. I mean, even think about this with 2015. Dylan Strome was considered the bust out of that group because he was like a 3rd overall pick, and he's still like a 40-50-point NHL center. From a Flyer standpoint, they've gone, again, a lot of wings. They have a lot of forwards. A lot of the wings in the system have done well, so they're progressing properly. Voided center ice, although they have plenty of center prospects and guys who have been proven in the AHL. But I'm being honest with you, and I've been studying and analyzing the Flyers for a while now. I really don't, unless they win the 1st or 2nd overall pick or a top 3 pick, they should not like really go for need. And if they have to draft another wing, then you draft another wing. It's just one of those things. But at the same time, you got the whole, we missed out on Jiricek, so maybe now, but you run the risk of overdrafting because you need a defenseman.
Yeah.
And
I just had to think with the draft that's so strong at forward, they'd be best served probably to go for a forward, right?
Yeah, and I would imagine they're going to look for a center. I mean, if they're going to go wing, I think they're open to it. Like you said, if it's the best player available.
But their need is center for sure, like you're saying.
Yeah, and it seems to me like there's a good crop here. I don't know too much about these guys, but like Will Smith, Braden Yeager, Dvorsky.
So I'll go down. Leonard, you know what? I'll just go down. I'll because I don't remember I think I can remember my top 10 offhand.
Okay.
So number one is
Bob
definitely
McKenzie's if you want.
No.
Okay.
So number one is definitely Bedard, undisputed. Although Mitchkov has definitely done. I mean, come on, we can't deny what Mitchkov has done. But I understand why you want Bedard to be the lock. He's in North America. He steps right away. He steps in right away. You sell the jerseys. He packs the arena.
Are those comparisons, Steve, to like, let's say, echelon of McDavid, Matthews? Is that accurate?
Yes.
I think it's above Matthews, to be honest.
Above Matthews, yes.
Well, I just want the confirmation. Obviously, we see the World Juniors and how special the kid is.
I saw that he's outscoring McDavid.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. His pace is in the juniors.
And remember that he's in the WHL every year. The WHL
is the lowest
scoring of the 3 major junior leagues. So this year it's probably gone up. But the whole ball of wax, right? Regina is a nothing team without him. They're literally, I mean, they have talent there, which is Dalev and Tanahau and Zvozil, the Columbus defenseman draft pick. But everything is about Bedard. And I tell you one thing, like, I think it's a waste of time to put together I had to make one, but it's a waste of time to put together a highlight reel because
everything he does is a highlight.
Everything he does is a freaking highlight reel.
It's crazy.
And he has such a great, he is a serious, just like McDavid. McDavid, people almost criticize him for it. Very serious. This isn't about like, oh, I want to be rich. I want to be famous. It's like, I just want to be the best player in the freaking game.
It's
and
so
not
obvious too.
Not in a cocky way, because they're both. Bedard is a very selfless player. He's a team first guy. He doesn't hog the puck. Yeah, okay, he likes to shoot the puck. Listen, when you have that wrist shot, of course.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. So let's just say, I'm being honest when I say this. I think that the worst case scenario for Bedard is Patrick Kane. That's the worst case scenario.
Yeah. Okay.
No,
worst case 100-point player, basically.
It's funny to hear that, but that's probably true.
It is accurate. Exactly. That's what I mean.
But like, as far as like, now the one thing that Bedard doesn't have is McDavid's dynamic speed.
Yeah.
And that adds to, McDavid's freaking legacy. And
I feel like his deceptiveness though makes up for just in terms of like the puck handling and what he does with the puck.
He reminds me of like a better version of Jack Hughes. Like he reminds
Oh
me
yeah,
of
yeah,
Jack
and I
Hughes
love Jack
only
Hughes,
with.
but no, he's way ahead of Hughes.
But
Hughes
I
was
just think
not dropping
some of
5
the
points
stuff
a game in
some of
World
the stuff
Junior.
he does with the puck, man, it makes me think of Datsuk, to be honest.
Everything. He's
It doesn't.
everything.
Yeah, it's
Listen,
crazy.
I'm going to come out and I'm going to say it, just like I said it with Michkov, that if the greatest goal scorer in NHL history is going to be Alexander Ovechkin, and Michkov is surpassing Ovechkin's marks in Russia and in tournaments by a pretty substantial margin, then you have to say that the potential is there for Michkov to become the greatest goal scorer in NHL history, just like Bedard and just like with Wayne Gretzky. I'm not even going to go Sidney Crosby. I'm not even going to go Connor McDavid. That Bedard, if he stays healthy, that he will, I think, do things. McDavid in the very beginning, he was like, oh, that was nice that he did that. Oh, wow, he is special. And again, he was winning hearts and roses very early on. But there's a different, like, it's almost like like Wayne Gretzky when he had the puck. It wasn't like, oh, he's going to just skate through a million people and go.
Something's going to happen. That's like magic, basically.
Wayne Gretzky was like, oh, I'm going to go get the puck in a line change and have my back to the bench, but I'm still going to catch the other team in a line change and their line change, and I'm going to do a through the legs backhand pass that's going to catch my line mate streaking for a breakaway. Like that's what Bedard does, and I watched Erie plenty. McDavid and Strome and DeBrincat and the Radishes, like Dermott. It was all go, 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 full speed, 1,000 miles an hour. That is not Bedard. Bedard is he's like a ankle breaking, calculated.
He's methodical. A lot of his movement.
I'll be honest, he's my favorite player to watch in the world right now.
Yeah.
Brilliant hockey mind. Brilliant hockey mind. There's no red flag. There's nothing to worry about. There's no
crazy.
He likes to shoot the puck. So some coaches might have to tell him, and I don't want to be that coach to say, well, maybe you don't shoot the puck as much. But
I don't think that's gonna happen.
You have Steve Michkov at number 2.
So Michkov at number 2 is a no-brainer. He's never left. And I am enjoying seeing the mainstream pivot back to Michkov now because they had no choice. They really wanted him to fail. They wanted him to not have a good season. They wanted him to, to say I remember that was it the Hockey News that said he has attitude problems. Oh, who cares?
Oh, that's such a narrative. Like,
yeah, it's like his attitude is I'm like the greatest junior age goal scorer in Russian hockey history. And the tournaments back it up. The league play backs it up. He dominated every league he's played in. He averaged a goal a game in almost every league he's played in.
I think he has a ton of shots on net as well. Like he's just shooting the puck at a high volume, right? So.
Well, no, that's actually not been the case.
Okay.
Well, like he'll have games where he'll have just like 1 or 2 shots and still score.
Oh,
like
fair. Okay.
that.
So high percentage of shooting then.
Out of all the things that Michkov does, that really, in my opinion, separates him from everybody else, and that includes guys on the junior level who play against guys that they could dominate. It's that no matter where he's gone, Michkov will always find a way to at least once a game have an insane shot or chance that he created on his own. And that, you might say, well, what about the other like 19 or 20 minutes? I get it. But he those games where he's only held to 1 or 2 chances are rare. He's usually good for like 5 to 7 to 8 chances. But even still, no matter when he's on the ice, every goalie he faces, every defenseman he faces, every forward, every coach, every GM, the opposing fans, they know that all it takes is one bounce, and it's going to end up on his stick, and he could do a million things with it, and to make everybody look foolish, and in the process put his team up on the scoreboard. So, he never lost that touch. He didn't lose that touch in the MHL. He didn't lose that touch when he went to the VHL, and he definitely didn't lose that touch when he went to Sochi. The knock on him was that, he was with Ska and he couldn't make the team. He had a freaking preseason hyperextended knee injury from the dirty hit from that third Alexei Yemelin. Like literally his like after Michkov established himself as a KHL regular in his draft -1 season, which, think of a Flyers prospect who was in Russia. If that guy scored 3 goals in the KHL, they'd have a parade for him. Michkov does it in the KHL, and it's like, it is draft -1, no less. So, this kid, everywhere he goes, he just delivers. So I think that, unfortunately, we do have owners in the league who will not draft the Russian player. And it's personal. They have their reasons. Obviously, I don't think I agree with them. The idea about the contract, I mean, unless you can guarantee that Adam Fantilli is going to be a 40-40 or 30-30 guy by 2026, or maybe let's even 2020.
Might as well take the risk with Michkov in that case.
Exactly. Because look at how all these top picks outside of like a McDavid, look at what Jack Hughes went through. He was called a bust. People called Jack Hughes a bust. People called Cabo Caco a bust. Lafreniere called a bust. All these top kids. Quentin Byfield a bust.
It's not always instant, right? Yeah.
Yeah, instant gratification.
Usually not.
So Jack Hughes, it's safe to say that, like, as of right now, Jack Hughes is an all-star, right? He produces like an all-star. He's fun to watch. He's the number one center on one of the best teams in the league. All right. But he is 20 now. He's now 22 years old. Okay. He's 22 years old. It took him, 3 years post-draft or 4 seasons, whatever it's been. Yeah, 4 seasons post-draft to get to that point. Okay. 4 seasons post-draft for Michkov is what? It's 2026-27 or 2025-26 when his KHL contract is up. So, we've seen KHL guys come over. First of all, look at Mikheyev. Look at Barabanov. Look at Kuzmenko. Look at Kaprizov. These are all guys. Nikita Gusev is the outlier in that group. But these are all guys who are in Russia until 24, 25 years old.
Came over and have been really good, yeah.
And came over and really good. So there's no reason to think that Michkov at 22 is like, oh, how do you score a goal? Oh, is this called a puck? Like, no, he's going to be destroying the freaking KHL. The only concern that you have is injury. But to answer your question, yes, he's my number 2. The GM that passes, that makes it. I don't think the scouts will make that call. I don't think a scouting director and his scouts will say to the GM, we don't want you to draft Michkov. We think he's a problematic option. It's going to either come from the GM or it's going to come from the ownership. It will not come from the scouts because the scouts' job is to do what? Watch the games and give assessments. We've seen these false narratives about Michkov about, his defense, he's small. That's all been debunked. So, not the easiest position to be in, though, for a scouting group because it sucks. Like you love this kid, but your owner hates Russians, so you don't want to draft him. Or it's like the GM's like, well, I need him here right away. Well, dude, like you're running the risk of passing on a freaking potential Ovechkin.
It's a weird situation with Fantilli, and I assume you have Fantilli at 3.
Fantilli at 3, fantastic year for Michigan. Hobie Baker should win the Hobie Baker. If not him, at least Lane Hudson. Ridiculous scoring pace. He's going to be the only freshman since Jack Eichel to lead the nation in scoring as a pure freshman, draft -1. He's big. He's fast. He's creative. He's smart. He's got an attitude. He's got personality. He's got a great shot. He could score in a zillion ways. He shows up to Michigan, and he's their number 1 center almost instantly. And that team is loaded with prospects. He did this in the USHL for the Chicago Wolves. He was okay in the first half of the World Juniors and came on like a freaking lion in the second half. So, and they won. He scored a big goal in the big game against the U.S. So, I will not have a problem if Fantilli's the guy that teams want to pass Michkov and they choose Fantilli instead. I won't have a problem with it because I get it. When we're looking at like, all right, let's knock him down to 7 and 10. That's where I'm like, all right, now we're being stupid.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about the Leo Carlson debate there? Is he somebody who could push Michkov down to 4?
That was recency bias from the World Juniors, and Central Scouting was stupid when they did that. Not again, I love Central Scouting; they're an invaluable reference. But to rank Leo Carlson ahead of Matvei Michkov, I don't know. Again, they did this last year with the Russians, so there might be something shady going on there.
Sort of bias, yeah.
Yeah, like so. Are you predicting a mock? Are you doing a mock draft? Or are you predicting what they'll be like when they play in the NHL in 3 to 4 years?
To your point, just so people have a reference here. So Michkov has 9 goals, 11 assists, 20 points in 27 games in the KHL. Leo Carlson has 10 goals, 15 assists, 25 points in 43 games in the SHL. I mean, I would make the case the KHL is a better league.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. Both men's
defensively
leagues.
Too. It's a low-scoring league.
Right, so it's much more difficult to produce. So when I look at that, I'm like, okay, so Michkov's clearly outproducing Carlson for their respective
in the better
well.
league. Exactly.
Yes.
So here's the bottom line. If you want to just go by stats alone, Michkov had the greatest. If you just focus on and you take away the 3 games he was with Scott, where one of them he didn't even play, and the other one he played like 3 minutes, the other one he played like 2 minutes. If you look at the 27 games he played with Sochi in the KHL and the teams that he scored against, he didn't just score against the bad teams. He scored against the good teams. Magnitogorsk, one of them. Ska, another one. It's that, Michkov set the record. Like, so in the history of the KHL, if you want to go all the way back to, was it 2008 or 9, he had the highest points per game average of any
even higher than Ovechkin, right?
Yeah. So Ovechkin was in the RSL, the Russian Super League, where very low scoring league, but still, if he played the number of games Ovechkin played, he would have the record. He meaning Michkov of highest points per game, highest goals by a Russian pre-draft player.
That can't be denied, just in general, right? So,
whereas Carlson is among. Like, he's among the Elias Lindholms, and he's among the Daniel Sedins, and he's among not Zibanejad, maybe like a Marcus Naslund. I forgot the numbers exactly, but still, like he's in a group. Now, Carlson is a very interesting prospect because he's a big body. He's kind of like a cut of Gauthier in a way, maybe not as an elite skater, but Carlson is like all IQ and creativity and, puck possession, stick handling. He runs the power play from the right half wall as a left shot. Big responsibility to give to a first-year draft eligible. Orebro is actually a pretty good team this year. He's got a hand in it. He was playing a lot of minutes in the beginning, and they got cut down a little bit midway. But, the thing is, we're looking at stats. A lot of his production in the beginning was on the power play. And I remember that was the knock against Bud Coles, and that was the knock against Casey Middlestat. Like, he only scores in the power play. So that's why you really have to kind of shuffle things around and contort and bend and twist to just put Michkov and Carlson on the same level. When Central Scouting went above and said, no, we're going to rank them ahead. I mean, they play in the same tournament, the Ivan Holinka tournament. Michkov had like 18 points in 5 games, and Carlson had like 2 points in 5 games. All right. And that's just one tournament, but I still see the potential for him to be a number 1 center or a number 1 wing. Carlson, that is. And you have to put him in that group of one of many players in this group who should become or produce at an all-star level.
So this is like so interesting to hear. After like hearing that, I feel like Carlson belongs in this group.
Yes.
Kind of below Michkov and all them. I like this like Will Smith group, this Braden Yeager. Like, so if the Flyers, like for Flyers fans who are listening, right? Like, if we're drafting in that 7, 8, 9, 10 range, even, I don't know, who are we looking at here? I can tell you for sure the Flyers are going to be looking at a center. And if, the better player's a winger, they'll go for that. But most likely they're going to be drafting a center. Who do you think the Flyers would be targeting?
There's a whole bunch. There are 4 centers really 3. Smith is on the smaller side. So you could say that, Smith is a sublime playmaker. We put him on a Clayton Keller, a little step below Jack Hughes in terms of, just excitability. But in terms of like
a Logan Cooley level type of player.
Yeah. I would say like Logan Cooley's a little bit flashier. But the thing about what I love about Smith, and I have him ranked 6th, is that, he plays in a very talented line with what's his name? Perot on one wing, and then on the other wing is Ryan Leonard. And that, like, it's clear cut. As good as those 2 wings are, it's clear that Smith runs everything. And he just, watching him away from the puck is as exciting as watching him with the puck. All right. He's so smart where he positions himself. He just I've seen him do this thing one time where he had the puck, though he was in the neutral zone, like moving in all different directions like he always does. The puck squirts free, and he takes one hand off the stick and extends his arm. And I think he's a right shot. So he's basically he's on his forehand with his one hand on his stick at the top of his stick. And he flicked like this little saucer pass that sprung his line for a breakaway goal. Crazy. I'm like, oh, okay. Like that, like little things like that is like, okay, that's not normal. Like to basically say like, oh, look, la-di-da, let me skate to the neutral zone, and there's the puck, and then with one arm and overextended, you literally saucer it over the, like, that's so
insane talent, sure.
Yeah, I'm not gonna, he is very talented, but again, 5'10", 100, 80 pounds, so he's strong, well balanced, but same thing with Braden Yeager. Now, Braden Yeager, though, he might be listed at like 5'11", like 165. He just looks bigger on the ice. He looks like, I don't know if he has a big helmet or if he's got like he wears lifts in his skates, but he looks like a 6'6" center, and he is arguably the best, or one of the best, one of the top two-way centers in the draft, where like all the big face-offs, all the penalty killing, and he also has an elite shot, so he could score goals. I think he set the record. Theo Fleury had the franchise Moose Jaw franchise record for goals by a 16-year-old, which was in the mid to late 80s, and Yeager broke that record, so he could score goals.
Not too shabby.
But what I love about him really is his effort away from the puck and his positional play. So he's more like a Jonathan Taves. And then the other side of that, you got the two centers with size. Dalibor Dvorsky, you might remember him from Slovakia in the World Juniors. Like I've said, he might as well be a third defenseman. He is so dedicated. And that does not mean that he can't score, because he goes to the Swedish J20 and he averages 2.5 points a game. So, but in terms of like, I don't know if you guys remember, they were playing either Team USA or they were playing, was it Finland or Sweden? I think it was Finland, where he's controlling, I think it was Finland. He's controlling the puck on the right half wall for the power play, the second power play unit. And he looked up at the clock with like 10 seconds left. I love that. The fact that he literally was controlling the puck and looked up at the clock and then went through his execution, and they scored a goal. And again, not using the World Juniors as an example, but just something that I noticed, that on the top power play unit for Slovakia, he wasn't on it. He was on the second unit with younger people, and they were better than the top unit with Hanzek and who's the other guy? I forgot, Nemets and everything.
That's impressive too, right?
Yeah.
With that first unit.
Dvorsky is 6 foot 200, 6'2", thick frame, muscular, dedicated. There's one guy that I think might be perfect for the Flyers. And, we never really, how long did Braden Shen play for the Flyers? I mean, I know he was traded. It was
like
probably 3-4 seasons.
Okay, so he ended up having a very successful career even after he left Philadelphia. And that, I know that I think I was on a Flyers-centric podcast about 3 or 4 years ago, and I guess they had some internal debate on the Braden Shen trade. And if they were, Nate Danielson is a kid who plays in the same program, Brandon Wheat Kings, big kid. It was a high Bantam pick, so he has the reputation. But Brandon's not a very deep team. And much like the situation with Crystal in Kelowna and with Bedard in Regina, that he is basically running the offense for them, and he is incredibly skilled, but he's also physical, great effort, long reach, good size. So, you want to move Gauthier to wing. You got that potential line of a Forster, Danielson, Gauthier. I mean, you got 3 6'2" types who could stick handle, pass, and shoot and skate.
That could be tough to deal with for sure.
Yeah. There's one guy we did forget to mention, though, and that's my number 5. And he's not a center, but he plays like one. That's Zach Benson. This kid, he's played with Bedard before, and he's like, yeah, I don't need you. You know what I mean? Like I'm good. And any other draft year without Bedard, he'd probably be in the conversation for number 1 overall with Fantilli, with Carlson, with Mitchkov. And he's going to hit 100 points as a first-year draft eligible with the Winnipeg Ice in the WHL. And the thing about him is his toughness. So he's only about 5'9", 5'10", but he loves to hit. The skill is way off the charts, okay? You're not going to hit 100 points in the dub, without being insanely skilled. So, that fire, that competitiveness, that clutch gene that he has. The thing I love too the most really about Benson is that Winnipeg is a very deep team. The ice, unlike the other teams I mentioned, he didn't have to be the number one player on there. They have Matt Savoy and
Savoy, exactly.
And Connor Geeky. Those are first round picks. They have Carson Lambos. He's a first round pick. They have who am I forgetting? Just have a really good team in general. But he's been their MVP, hands down. And
that's pretty impressive because Savoy, like you're saying, has already been drafted, and you have Geeky there as well. So just for him to be that good, Benson is just crazy.
Yeah, Geeky and Savoy both had slow first halves, and Benson basically carried the offense. I mean, so I just went through about 9 forwards, and that includes Bedard and Michkov. This is that group. Like I said, if you could get a Braden Shen type or a Sean Couturier type,
that's a building block. That's a building block for sure.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those situations where these kids are mature, so they're not going to take a while to develop. There's some cases I think they already are developing. We might actually see. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm wondering, Steve. Yeah, like what was your thoughts on Andrew Cristal? Because I know I've seen him on rankings, kind of just like all over the place, like. In some people's top 10, some people have him around like 20, 15 range. Where did you have him actually?
I moved him up. So he was not my preseason. I've only done 2 lists, a preseason and a midseason.
Okay.
My preseason, he was off it. And it was based on kind of like chicken with a head cut off type, necessarily like not having a whole lot of basically like having tunnel vision. And so Ivan Holinka rolls around and he has a great tournament. I'm like, gosh, I guess I'm going to have to keep an eye on him now because he really was fantastic. And then to go to Kelowna, who stinks, and then to produce almost like to be neck and neck, in spurts with Bedard, albeit he's like a smaller guy too. I'm like, all right, well, let me go and research it. I go back, I research it again, and although he's putting up all these points, he's showing some minor flaws in his game, really just like liking to shoot the puck. Although he's a wing, you say, well, he's just there to score goals. A lot of selfish decisions with the puck. And so I was like, all right, let me put him in the bottom half of the first round. And then he got hurt. And then he came back from the injury and like really is played well, like perfect hockey, with or without the points on the board. But the reason why he shot up everywhere was the points.
Yeah, exactly.
That no one was really doing a deep analysis on his game. Central Scouting comes out. They don't have him ranked very high. And so people are like, oh, they're nuts. They make mistakes. But for me, I saw flaws. I still see flaws, but you can't deny the production and the shot and some of the aspects of his skill set. So I split the difference and I put him at 15. I said, you know what? This kid has the potential to be a great player. He produces. He's got great attitude. He's basically carrying the offense for a really mediocre team. So I'm going to reward him for that, and that's why I just split the difference and put him at 15.
Could you see him rise potentially? Do you think?
Well, he won't be involved in any type of deep playoff run, whereas Benson will.
Okay.
And Jaeger will.
Yeah, because he's on Kelowna isn't that great. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It all depends on a lot of factors. The one thing that we haven't talked about as far as is the defense.
Yeah.
Is initially, like I said, there were 3 or 4. Now there's 7 to 9. And I don't know if that's because scouts want a draft to be more balanced, or they want some of those top end, second tier forwards to maybe slip down a little bit, because history says teams will always draft defensemen in the top 10, usually almost 99% of the time. So in that case, if we see defensemen like Ryan Baca because of his maturity and playing against men, Simashev because of his size and his skill and playing against men a little bit as well this season, that will knock a guy like Crystal down, or it might knock Benson down. I really don't know what NHL team scouting departments are thinking when it comes to Benson versus Crystal. Or really Riley Height, putting on those WHL guys in there. But again, it just speaks to the depth of the draft.
Yeah, Sorry, I was gonna say, Steve, sorry to interrupt you, but I was gonna say just laying it out here and bringing all these players up, it just shows that there's so many guys that are very talented in this top half. I think. I
mean, look at it this way: if Crystal does fall. He is going to be top 5 by season's end, as a first-year draft eligible, that means his 17, 18-year-old season, he's going to be top 5 in points per game. And like that, you're going to get that in the middle of the first round, potentially even late first round.
Crazy in terms of talent. Yeah,
exactly. So that's a risk that you take. That is if your team creates a draft list that is focusing on offense and skill, he is a best player available. He'll be at probably maybe even like, you could say like 10, 11. I can't put him in the top 5. I can't put him ahead of Benson. Fair, because, Benson literally is like, I mean, there's really nothing. He's
outplaying guys that have already been drafted, really, like you said.
Yeah. I think Benson's a perfect specimen, except for his size. Whereas Crystal, you could find a couple things that needs to work on.
That's intriguing. I mean, at least for Benson, like I think maybe the Flyers might key on him if they're around that area, him or Jaeger, just based off kind of what you're saying. I think those two would probably be of interest to them. And what
if Hexall was GM, they're drafting Jaeger because he's a Brandon Wheat King. But
I love it.
Yeah, but no, it's a listen. Flyers fans who follow the draft and track prospects, especially this 2023 group, they're probably already set on their favorites. Okay, and so just like that drives the narrative because most people, when you have a blog or a podcast and all you do is focus on your own NHL team, and you can't think about the draft in October. You really can't. You shouldn't think about it in November, but like December, like all right, well, we're out of it. Let me think about it. What I try to advise people to do is like, if you can, just watch the top 5 kids play, like just one game or like YouTube highlights, because the narratives always shift, and people, because they're so busy covering the NHL teams, they'll say, I'll trust this guy, and like hence this podcast. But like, I'll trust this guy because of what he said. But the one thing that I'll say about the finding fault and having favorites, if you are going to be stubborn as let's say a Flyers fan, then let's say you like Jaeger but you don't like Benson, I hope you'd give good reasons why instead of just saying, I don't like this guy, and I don't like the way he looks, so he hasn't done well in like the last 2 games. Because it really is like I waste more time trying to convince people that the guy that they drafted is pretty good than actually like reporting on it. I feel like around draft time, there's always like, Steve, please help us. What happened? Why do we draft like Mason Laurie with the Bruins, Chinakov with Columbus? It's always like, Gauthier with the Flyers. There's always going to be you have to explain. Like, look at the San Jose trade. The Sharks fans hated every single prospect. Well, what do you think about their play? Well, I don't know, but this guy says they're not good. I mean, come on. Like, clearly Mike Greer's not like, the GM of the Sharks. Who are the 4 worst prospects that this team has? Yeah. Oh, okay, let's take them.
Or I'm sure the scouting department didn't do that or didn't help out with that.
Right? Like, clearly, like, they do their due diligence. So, the Flyers, if they decide to draft a defenseman, they're going to be like 4 guys in a group, okay? And it all depends on what kind of defenseman. So I'll ask you guys, Vasili, if you could draft a defenseman to help the Flyers down the road, what kind of defenseman you want? You want a physical type? You want a power play quarterback? What do you want?
They need the power play offensive type, I would say.
Okay, Yariv, your turn.
I'd say 2-way guy who can play with Provorov.
Okay, so if we're going for pure skill alone, there's really only 2 guys, and that's Goyayev, the Russian, who's fantastic, not big but skilled, and then Sanheim Palika, the Swedish kid, same thing. There's a couple of defensemen who are so skilled you could get them in round 2 and 3. But remember, the Flyers don't have a second round pick this year, so you have to entertain the idea that they might say, you know what, Vasili, let's say if they agree with you and they consider that power play quarterback. That with D'Angelo, he's just temporary, and that Cam York, he'll be there one day. We want to focus him, give him a more diverse role, like strictly offense. You go with Gulyayev or you go with Palika. If they draft either of those guys at like 6, 7, 8, 9, I'm gonna come out and say that night it's a need pick, but it's a need pick that makes sense because these guys are skilled. If you want the mature, poised safety net with potential for offense, that's where you go with either Simashev, the big Russian kid, or you go with Ryan Bacher, who's really, I mean, underrated. I want to say he's underrated. I just don't think people who see his name really appreciate how advanced he is. Now, he was not in my preseason top 32, but to go to the Swedish Elite League, the Swiss Elite League, and play for a good team in Cloton and play top 4 minutes and power play their quarterback and look good in the process, like that means a lot to me. So I think, Ryan Bacher is a kid. If there's going to be any defenseman who goes in the top 10, I think it's going to be Ryan Bacher first. But, those, and then as a sleeper guy, Barry Colts, there's this Tyson Forster, the Tyson Forster connection is Bo Akey. And I've talked about him. I had a podcast about him where I call him in a way like a potential Shea Weber or Ryan McDonough. Like that's the kind of player that he is. Now, Weber was a second-round pick. McDonough was a mid-first-round pick. So, if you want to say, we'll let Akey slip a little bit. But he's a right shot, physical, beautiful skater, beautiful shot. I mean, I don't know why I'm so partial to him, but, I put him in my first round. A lot of people haven't. But he might be a dark horse for the Flyers, but there's no way he's going top 10.
Yeah.
He's going to probably be like an option if they somehow get an extra pick. So, there are a lot of guys we could talk about in terms of, guys that, we could talk about Ryan Leonard. I mean, Torts would love a guy like Ryan Leonard. I don't know. He's probably going to be like 3 or 4 years away, but you got a high volume score. He's Will Smith's line mate, and he scores in bunches. He hits maybe one of the most violent, high scoring wings we've seen in a while. But that the name, all the names I mentioned, I think we reached like the 90% solution. One of those players I mentioned will be a Flyer.
What about oh, go ahead, please.
No, based on like the lottery and the fact that they can't fall so low and where they are in the standings now. If they go on a winning streak, wouldn't it be freaking crazy if the Flyers go on a winning streak? And
I don't know. If you look at their who they're going to play coming up, they probably won't. But who knows?
No, I know.
Right?
But let's just say hypothetically they do it, like JVR's like scoring hat tricks. You're like,
God.
That'd be the worst. So one more guy that's interested me. I do want to wrap it up here. We're getting close to 3 hours at least on the recording.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Edward Saleh. I believe.
Yeah, Chalet. I mean,
Chalet.
I've been watching him playing for a pretty good team in the mediocre team, but intense competition in the Czech Republic. This guy produces everywhere. He's a similar, I'd say, to like Lucas Raymond. Okay. Very, very skilled hands, beautiful shot. Aggressive. He creates his own chances. He's stuck with that team. His production is similar to Nachas and Hedel and Zadina, etc.
I was just about to ask you if he reminds you of Nachas. Just looking at him, 17 years old, 6'1", 168 pounds. This just, to me, just on a complete surface level, this seems like the type of guy who's gonna rise after getting drafted.
Hold on. I'm gonna power up real quick because of my.
It's all good. We've been going for a while.
I think. I'm sorry. I asked again because I was in the middle of.
No, it's all good. He just seems like a prime guy, just with his age, the fact that he's 17, he's 6'1", 168 pounds. I just have like flashes in my head of when I saw footage of like Elias Pettersson in his draft year, and I remember the only reason I wasn't interested in him was because he was thin. He was
160 pounds, 155 pounds, whatever it was. Yeah.
And I can't help but think back to like the highlights I saw of him. I was like, they were incredible. And then obviously he just filled out a little bit. And then now, the rest is history. But I look at a guy like this and I'm like, this might be one of those guys where you're like, wow, like.
Yeah, it's overlooked a bit, but ends up being
I don't know that just everything you're saying. That's kind of what.
But here's the thing, and I agree with what you're saying, but this isn't a normal draft year.
I know.
So you can make a case. You can make a case for Chalet being 15 and not 10. You can also make a case from being 5.
Just because there's so many good players that you could compare him to, right? That could be ahead of
that kind. Hey, listen. We're allowed. We as a sport, hockey, as fans, we're allowed to get a draft like this every freaking 7 to 10 years. The NFL draft, it seems like 2 out of every 4. Great draft, deep draft, quarterback draft, linebacker draft. We don't get this very often. You know what I mean? And at the very top, you got Mitchkov and Bedard.
So let me say this. Right now, the Flyers fan base consensus is that this team lacks high end talent. I can't even mention the amount of times that I hear that these no offense, guys, nonsense shit that people just repeat to themselves and whatever. But are you saying at this point that anybody that the Flyers essentially take within this range, barring them winning the lottery draft, we should be walking away happy, and that one of these guys is a high end piece, at least in the caliber of Cutter Gauthier, where we can say, hey, we have Gauthier, we have this other guy, and here's two pieces of a top line right
that
here.
Are high end, technically.
Put it this way, all right. They could go off the board, i.e. the consensus board. They could draft a guy that a lot of people have in the 20s and 30s, and that guy will still have like first line potential, not top six potential, first line potential.
That's
crazy.
ridiculous.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Brock Besser, like Travis Konechny, late in 2015, right?
That makes you think like a team like St. Louis has 3 first-round picks. How insane it is for them on their rebuild.
Don't
Right?
remind our fan base,
and they already have some pretty good prospects in place to begin with. But the again, like this is the only thing that I would be a little upset about if I'm a Flyers fan is not having the second round pick, because there will be,
I agree.
that to me the drop off will happen, like when we start saying, oh my God, they got him. The drop off is going to happen probably like middle of round 2. But listen, like Sorelli, Kaprizov, these guys in 2015 were drafted late outside of the top 2 rounds, and they are fantastic NHL players. Obviously, Kaprizov on the highest end of that. So, the thing is that though the Flyers have a lot of picks, they have 2 thirds, right?
And 2 fourths and 2
fourths and 2 sixths, I think, right?
2 sixths.
So,
yeah, they can move up
so
potentially.
in theory, they could trade the 2 thirds for a second, the 2 fourths for a third, and the 2
and
sixths
just move it up, basically.
Keep moving up, and so what? Oh, you don't have a 7th. You know what I mean? You don't have a 6th and a 7th. So I know there was like I'd be mad at Fletcher too about not having a second round when you're rebuilding, but like they have 9 picks.
Yeah,
so
they can be flexible and do something if they really needed to, or if there's a guy in the second round that they really want to move up to grab, let's say, right?
Listen, right? I've been doing this since 2015. There's only been I think like 2 seasons where Flyers fans were not like, please talk to me about the draft. Like, you guys have been, Provo was a high pick. Sanheim was a high pick. So it's like, I hate keep saying this, but listen, this draft is really freaking special. I'm not saying it's strong. I'm saying it's borderline historic.
Yeah.
And a chance to be historic. So that's going to add more pressure to the kids, though. Because if you draft a guy like Danielson at number 8 and you pass on Crystal and he turns out to be Braden Point, look, I'm a Ranger fan. They botched 2003. They drafted Hugh Jessamine ahead of
the only
a whole wing of the Hall of Fame.
The only team that I'll walk away with a star player that first round.
And the Blues drafted what was his name? Bell. Was it Sean Bell or Brandon Bell?
Mark Bell, I think.
No, not Mark Bell. He was.
I think it was Brandon.
It was Sean Bell
or Brandon. I can't remember.
Shawn. Maybe, I don't know. But anyway, that was it. Like, everybody else was like Corey Perry, Getzlav, Richards, Carter, So, it would be nice to have an extra first round pick considering where the Flyers on the standings, and also take the pressure away from that first round pick, the first kid that they select.
Yeah.
But listen, Gauthier's in the same boat too. So you got basically like 2 years back to back of drafting, a top 10 pick. And if it's a forward, more the merrier.
Awesome. All right, let's cut it here. Like I said, we almost hit 3 hours here. Another great one. Steve, we're going to have you back on probably like after or maybe right around the draft. We can get, but hopefully we can talk about results. That'd be more fun maybe. Talk about who was actually taken and all that stuff. But Steve, what are you working on? What can our audience, what can they follow along with?
So if you go to my Substack, I do prospect daily highlights. I roll up, the full day in Europe and North America on not every team's prospect, because sometimes they just don't have a good game. But I usually release it, 5 to 7 days a week. I'm doing my draft profiles, but of course the draft report I already started working on it now. So, podcast once every couple of weeks. It'll increase with as we find out more teams drop out of the race. Follow me on Twitter at the Draft Analyst. YouTube channel is Prospect Film Room. And go to my Substack, draftanalyst.substack.com. And if you want to pay for it, it's by my guest, but there's also free content on there. Like Mitch Korv's draft profile is free. My rankings are free. So, subscribe, free, pay either way. But I think you're going to be satisfied. A lot of good information. I got projects I'm working on. They're almost done that will be released soon. And, it's going to add to it's just a great year to cover the draft. It's in Nashville too.
Yeah.
So perfect storm for you, Steve.
Yeah.
Well, I ain't going anywhere. I'll go downtown, maybe have a beer after everything is done, but because I got to report from everything from my office. But it's I know I've said this before, but it's a good year to stink, and so
it is a good year to stink. It's one thing I keep saying to Flyers fans. I was like, look, if we were healthy, we wouldn't even be in the conversation for any of these top
so to
picks.
Be in this top 10 in this situation is a good thing, obviously, for the organization where they're at and their development and the rebuild in general, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Middle of the road is even worse. Vasili, anything you want to add?
No, just awesome episode and great, to get Steve on, get his insight on all the prospects. And like usual, I mean, working on articles and things like that. So keep an eye out on Flyers Nitty Gritty and, check out all the other great writers' stuff as well, because they do an awesome job.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you both. Again, Steve, thank you so much for joining us again and doing another one of these long sessions. They're awesome. Thank you again to our audience. Our numbers for our last episode were the highest we've ever had for a podcast. Probably around everybody freaking out over the trade deadline, but we really appreciate it. It was awesome to see. We gained a bunch of subscribers and whatnot. So thank you all so much. Again, a reminder to please like, subscribe, share, comment, do all of that. And please rate our podcast audio versions on Spotify and iTunes. It definitely helps us. If you could leave us a 5-star, obviously, that would be the biggest help. Again, we love you so much. Thank you for listening. And remember, always stay gritty.